I think it has been underestimated. I think it quietly. I mean, it could be a stage that really does creep up on people if they're not ready for it. Over 4,000 meters of climbing. It's going to be a big day. Not necessarily a summit finish, but we could still see some big moves from the GC teams.
You've reconned?
Yeah, I mean, I know most of the roads there, and it's going to be a tough stage, that's for sure.
Here's the profile of the stage Chris Froome is talking up. 6 official climbs and perhaps as many unofficial ones. The centrepiece, if a centrepiece can come at the end, is a double ascent of the Grand Colombier. First as a 1,500-metre super category climb, then via the laces, the spectacular switchbacks that go up to 900 metres before the swoop down to Culo for the finish. Adam Yates will wear the white jersey of best young rider into the stage, a byproduct of the brilliant ride that currently sees him lying 3rd overall. He's 58 seconds behind Bauke Mollema, who's a minute 47 behind Froome. Those are the 3 men on the podium as things stand, with Nairo Quintana the only other rider within 3 minutes of Froome, looking to change that between here and the final stage in the Alps next Saturday. He's finished runner-up in both Froome's previous victories. Yates is in unknown territory.
We're going to fight every day, and whatever happens. If I lose some minutes, then I lose some minutes. There's nothing I can do about it. But yeah, we'll fight it for every second, and yeah, we'll see what happens in Paris.
Hello, it feels like a binary race this year. We're either sprinting or climbing with no real transitional stages in between. And after the Massif Central, the Pyrenees and Mont Ventoux, we've reached the penultimate mountain test of the 2016 Tour, the Jura. They can't match the Alps, which are still to come for scale, but they make up for it in sheer relentlessness. By the way, if you're wondering where Chris Boardman is, I'm afraid he's had to fly home for a family emergency, and our thoughts travel with him. We'll do our best in his absence, though, and today we've got the whole of stage 15 for you, all 160 kilometres, plus possibly a couple of bonus kilometres before the flag drops. Plenty of attacks too today because it's a good breakaway stage. And I think that's about all you need from me. Coiled, catheterised and ready for a long stint in the commentary cupboard are Ned and David.
Yeah, it'll be a half-decent stint today in the commentary box, David. And it was yesterday, actually. We didn't have the whole race, but we're expecting, relative to that kind of procession into the headwind yesterday on those flat lands, a bit more action today because it's just unrelenting. Chris Froome just gave a interview to French television in his perfect French these days, where he said there is not a metre of flat road today.
No, I think for me, and I think for many of the peloton, this is going to be one of the hardest, if not the hardest day of the Tour de France. You don't have the big mountains where it's 3 big efforts, 3 big descents of recovery. This is all day up and down, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 classified climbs, and then there's another 3 or 4 that aren't even classified. So there isn't a metre of flat. I think they counted a total, actually, of 20 kilometres flat.
Well, as you can see, the flag hasn't dropped yet. We are looking down on Bourg-en-Bresse, today's Ville de Départ, where the race is starting before they head up into the Jura Mountains. And as ever, David, we're anticipating the first hour or so, maybe half an hour, maybe a couple of hours of racing to be some of the most interesting before the race then stabilises. That's the expectation again, and then reaches its big crescendo on the 2 ascents of the Grand Colombier. That's the predicted pattern, but who knows what might emerge.
No, and I think everybody knows that a day like today, a break is going to go, and nobody really knows if it's a break that will make it to the finish or not. It's not like the sprinters' days where the break goes and you anticipate it being caught. Today is a high possibility if the break goes, as we saw the Greg van Avermaet stage and also Thomas de Gent. They were similar stages, and often in the mountain stages the break does make it, and especially on a day like this. And we're going to see quite early on, we can see there Thomas de Gent in the mountains jersey, and he'll have Rafa Majka not far from him. And they're going to be racing that. We're going to have other guys that are racing for the stage. We're going to have the GC racing. We'll have team classification racing. We'll have the white jersey. So there's about 4 or 5 different races going on. And then, you never know, we might see Peter Sagan on one of his rampages to make it to that sprint at 71 Ks. But that would involve him getting over, let me see, 1, 2, 3 classified, but also 4 unclassified climbs. That's what we mustn't forget about today. Although we've got all those classified climbs, there's just as many unclassified climbs.
And there in the distance is Le Mont Blanc. We saw it beautifully picked out on the horizon yesterday, well over 3,000 metres, and the snow is still thick, as it always is all year round on the top of Mont Blanc. So as ever, the jersey wearers have been pulled to the front of the procession as they continue to roll out behind the pace of the race direction car. The yellow jersey of Chris Froome, the green jersey of Peter Sagan, not too far away. That's Tony Martin you're looking at, the German from Etixx Quick-Step. There's Thomas de Gendt, who will be nailed on to at least try and get in the breakaway of today and scoop up some mountain points. In fact, the first climb of the day could be a really important one for de Gendt. It's a Cat 1 climb, and if he gets in that break and manages to get over the top of that in first place, there are 10 points to add to his tally of 90, so that'll take him to 100 points.
It's true that whoever wants to stand a chance of wearing the Mountains jersey in Paris, they have to be in the breakaway today. They can't wait around and wait to get the final climbs. They have to be off the front, getting that first Cat 1, then the Cat 2, the Cat 3, and then, if they're lucky, make it over the super category called the Grand Colombier. But that's 113 Ks, and you would expect that to happen. But at the same time, we're yet to see if maybe Movistar launch an offensive from far out, or even BMC, in which case the whole race would change.
Yeah, there's a number of different permutations. One theory is that the breakaway might be really big today. I mean, you might see 20-plus riders, none of whom obviously are a threat in the general classification, given an advantage of 20, 25 minutes, and then you'll know that it's probably a day when we're going to have a race within a race, and two races to enjoy. And
you can see the Etixx Quick-Step riders sitting up out of the saddle. He can see the kilometre to go, those little inflated kilometre zero signs, and that's we're going to see, I expect, today. There's going to be a lot of tension. You can see riders up there. That's Marcus Berghoff of BMC. So BMC are already present at the front, which is interesting. That would indicate that they're interested in at least covering moves and not missing before perhaps going on the attack if it turns out that they see a GC race could happen. Christian Prudhomme getting ready the moment to cross the flag, cross that kilometre zero. He's going to wave that flag, and then we will normally, I think, see a massive wave of attacks on a day like this.
Christian Prudhomme, leaning out of the top of his car with a microphone in his hand, started life as a television commentator on France Télévisions, Christian Prudhomme, and now it's his show, and he waves the flag, and off they go. Who's going to be the first to attack today? A little bit of action on the right-hand side of the road. Andre Greipel.
It's one of those days where nobody wants to be the first. We'll see it. Because see the way it's wide across the road, and you can see nobody talking to each other. Everyone's just kind of waiting to see who's going to do first, because nobody wants to be that unpopular person that launched it. And here we go.
Scarbu Krumai is the first to go from Lamprey Merida. He's gone, the climber, and he's tracked all the way by Marcus Burkhardt. I think it's Julien Vermont or Ilio Kaiser it is, I think. Just tracking him for Etixx Quick-Step. And Thomas de Gendt in the polka dot jersey. Well, he has to go up the road, and he's duly responded. There's a little move as well from a rider from Fortuner Vital Concept, and I would imagine that's Pierre-Luc Perichon, who's born and lives in Bourg-en-Bresse.
Peter Sagan as well, so Peter Sagan is going to go for those points, so it's turning into one of those days which the sprinters hate Peter Sagan for, because they don't stand a chance of making it through these first, for what is it, 63 Ks over those 4, 5, 6 climbs to the first sprint, where Peter Sagan, that is a realistic possibility.
De Gendt's motoring, and he's got a little advantage with the Etixx Quick-Step rider on his wheel over the rest, so he's firmly committed to this early move. No guarantee that this move will get away. Jersey I haven't seen, though, is Rafa Majka's.
Well, we know that Rafa Majka does play quite a clever game, and his team might be more orientated into actually helping him do this. If they see him go, maybe the team will actually chase it down themselves and bring it back together. But we can see Peter Sagan being very active on the front there. And Thomas again is forcing this. He's got nothing to lose in that respect. He's not really going for the stage win. I imagine he anticipates being caught on the final climb, called the Grand Colombier. The La Ceste de Grand Colombier, but his ambition will be, no doubt, to just try and scrape it over the Grand Colombier the climb before, which this might be confusing people. They're going to do a lap when they get to Culoz, which is quite rare in the Tour de France. They're going to climb the super category called the Grand Colombier, summit 113 Ks, then drop down into Culoz, cross the finish line, and then go up on the other side of the Grand Colombier, the La Ceste. And so it's going to be quite interesting in that respect. They're going to do the same descent twice.
Two Belgians head the race. It's Julien Vermont, actually, from Etixx Quick-Step. Pretty sure, with Thomas de Gendt. Those two have a little bit of an advantage, but riders now will continually try and breach the gap and get across to these two. Once again, two Belgians up the road. That's been a feature.
That has been a feature in this race. They've been riding a very aggressive race, which...
and he's always one of them, isn't he, Thomas de Gendt?
It is. It's often the way in the Tour de France, if the fit guys can just keep repeating the efforts and they start to read the race better because they see what moves work and they start to get the confidence. And because you have to start the day in such an aggressive mood. Often you'll see a lot of these guys at the back, their sole intention is to just get through today. I see Steve Cummings in his unracing position, if you like, just waiting. But you never know with Steve. He might suddenly see that it's fallen to pieces, as Peter Sagan is now chasing that down. So he's driving it. So we have the Mountains jersey and the green jersey both driving this forward, wanting to make a break work.
And they're climbing as well. This is an uncategorised climb that you can see stretching out on the road in front of you. You can see how it rises into the foothills of the Jura Mountains before they take on the first climb of the day, which officially starts at 143 kilometres to go. It's the Col du Bertillon. It's 6 kilometres long, and it's an average gradient of 8.1%. So that's not nothing. That is a Cat 1 climb. And it won't be long, 14k in fact, before they are on that climb.
And this is always the big risk as well when you're like the riders that are making these first moves in these first few kilometres, they're gambling a little bit that it works. Look at Peter Sagan forcing it. They need to make this work and get a gap before that Cat 1 climb begins. Because if they don't, they're going to hit it massively in the red zone and then be counter-attacked. So you do have to make a decision, and you do have to commit to it completely and risk the fact that if it doesn't work, you're going to be in a world of pain getting blown out the back when they do hit that Cat 1.
Oh, it's all strung out at the front, isn't it? So this break is nothing like established just yet. There's too many riders still trying to get across. And the front end of the peloton, where the yellow jersey group and Team Sky will be watching and checking every number that goes up the road, has not decided to sit up and allow this race any sort of stability just yet. So it's flat out.
Well, it has been quite interesting. We saw from one of the first attacks Marcus Burkhardt marking it, and so we saw some of the GC2C Movistar being quite active behind as well. I think that's one of the Izagiri brothers who's bringing that back, and Astana are there. But I'll be interested to see if we are. I mean, you'd like to think that BMC or Movistar would try and launch an offensive today.
Brice Fayou, I think, is the Fortuner Vital Concept rider who's up the road, a former stage winner on the Tour de France. Haven't seen him in a move yet, but I think he's got himself across to Thomas de Gent and Peter Sagan, in fact using the wheel of Peter Sagan to get across. And I think Paul Voss might be there as well for Bora Argon, the German rider who's been in 3 or 4 breakaways, I forget just how many, but he is trying to hunt down the Baroudeur title in Paris for the rider with the highest number of kilometres in breakaway moves across the Tour de France, a competition for the time being which is being led by Greg van Avermaet, but just by 1 kilometre to Alex Howes.
Yeah, and that becomes quite an important competition in itself, and that it's the amount of respect you gain. If it's maybe not one of the official classifications, it does. Teams notice that, and direct sportees notice that, and also the other riders. You do gain a massive amount of respect for it, and if you win that, you also get to stand on the podium in Paris.
All come back together again, though. And another attack goes in the middle of the road this time. So the polka dot jersey of Thomas de Gent has come back. There's a level crossing just a little bit up the road.
New signs they're using these days, since a couple of years ago at Paris-Roubaix, where a lot of riders jumped a level crossing when a train was coming.
Yeah.
So now they've actually put a sign up saying, there's a train might come, please be careful.
Behave yourselves. Sylvain Chavanel gets to the front for Direct Energie, and he's got the green jersey, paying close attention to him, and they're all looking now to see which team and which rider will be the next to animate things.
And it's always interesting at this point in the race as well to get a gauge of who is interested in this and what teams are playing, what teams are covering. Now Sylvain Chavanel launches again. I think that's maybe, I can't quite see the what. So Thomas de Gent again, then Fortuna Vital as well, going massively for this. So we're getting an idea. The GC teams aren't quite launching anything at the moment, but they may have seen in those first 5Ks, 10Ks that a lot of the break isn't going immediately.
I think Vincenzo Nibali is interested today. Is that his blue jersey for Astana?
You're right.
Yeah, there we go. So Vincenzo Nibali is sitting on the 2-wheel on Brice Fayou's wheel, and he looks like he fancies going up the road, which is interesting, to say the least. Ramanas Navadauskas for Cannondale Drapac. He's looking like he wants to get in the move as well, but nothing has got away just yet, and they are still strung out in a long line.
So yeah, as I was saying, at that point, that first wave of attacks that we saw after kilometre 0, where Marcus Burkhardt from BMC jumped straight on it, we saw some Movistar riders there as well, and I think also there was another GC team. But they'll see that didn't work. That first one didn't move. So now they're probably all waiting, knowing that at kilometre 16.5, they're going to hit the bottom of this Category 1 climb. And they're going to want to make sure they save. They just cover defensively now till they hit that, because when they hit that, it won't be tactics. It's going to go on pure strength.
Well, this could go on all day. No breakaway has got away just yet. But we're going to have to take one, I'm afraid. So we'll be back as soon as we possibly can. 149 kilometres to go, and still they continue to get off the front, and still Brice Feilleux is one of those men trying to make a move, but Warren Barguil for Team Giant Alpecin is on the move, and that's an interesting one. They won't really like the prospect of him getting up the road, so it gets harder and harder as they approach the foot of the Cat 1 climb, which is at 143k, to get away from this group. And the more big players that go off the front, the harder it gets as well.
Yeah, and it was Movistar that launched that. I think it's Oliveira. And then after that, you saw Brice Feilleux again, and then the AG2R rider, and that's Brice Feilleux in third position. And then we saw Warren Barguil go from, which was quite surprising to see him go this early, but this is very basically announcing that the big teams are going to start moving this forward, and to see Movistar attacking and forcing this, that's very interesting. Brice Feilleux has blown up and let go. See the third rider just dropping off there. He's tried to stay with those two riders and it's just exploded him, and he was in the previous moves.
Rui Costa is the Lampre rider trying to make the junction across to Oliveira, and I think it might be Michael Cherel. We'll get confirmation of the AG2R Le Mondial rider. And is that Ilnur Zakarin from Katusha?
Possibly, in which case we do have some big engines now moving off the front. So you can see how riders are blowing up and the gaps are opening. And this is at the front, so we can imagine at the back it's starting to have total destruction. And we're still just under 5 kilometres from the bottom of the first Cat 1. So that does mean that it's going to be a very strong group that goes, because the race is under such high pressure now that when they do actually hit the proper climb, it's only the very strong guys that will go. And Movistar will realise that, and that's probably why they're already forcing it before then.
It's come back again. That move hasn't gone. The polka dot jersey of Thomas de Gent is paying close attention. And now the rider from AG2R Le Mondial goes again, and it's a bit of a full-on effort. There's too much impetus to bring this all back at the moment. Barguil still very prominent, and de Gent's having a huge first 12 kilometres of this race.
Yeah, he is, and you just got to hope that it's he's not going to pay heavily for that when they hit the Cat 1. He must know what he's doing, and obviously we know he's storming, you know, amount of breaks he's going, and the fact he was able to do that break and win at Chalet Grenade on the Mont Ventoux stage. So
he's having a brilliant Tour de France, isn't he, Thomas de Gent?
And but he needs to, if he wants to keep that jersey, he needs to be in that breakaway today. He can't miss it. He can't wait for another stage. And any of the riders that want to compete and wear that jersey in Paris, they have to be in that break today, and they have to be taking as many points as they can.
Well, that's a mid-12th century dungeon, Le Donjon de Bourg, quadrangular keep. And these guys are kind of locked up in a world of pain as well. Arthur Vichot, the next man to go, and he's got a teammate with him. 2 riders from FDJ tracking the polka dot jersey. And still Oliveira tries to get away from Movistar.
Starting to split a little bit, but
Nibali's interested again, I think.
Peter Sagan slowly moving up. He's in about 15th position there. There's Alex Howes paying for his breakaway yesterday, the Cannondale dropout rider number 84. But you see how elongated this is. That spells disaster for many of those riders when they hit the Cat 1, because the gaps will just open so easily.
There comes the green jersey. He's on the rampage again. Peter Sagan has responded to this latest move from Arthur Vichot, and he is up the road.
Katusha are very present as well. So
Vicioso.
That's obviously their team tactics today are to make this breakaway and to chase the stage. But look at that. You can see now, with only a handful or 2 or 3 kilometres to go to the bottom of that climb, with pelotons already this stretched out and this stressed, we're going to see a fair explosion when they hit the bottom of this climb, because it's a Cat 1 climb. It's 6 kilometres at 8.1%, so that's the real deal.
Still they pile across the gap, and that's a big group of riders. Cyril Gauthier, one of them from AG2R Le Mondial, and looking for the yellow jersey, because ultimately it's Team Sky and the yellow jersey primarily who will determine when to shut this down. Sometimes the thing to do is not to look at the actual front of the race, but look a little bit further back to see where the yellow jersey is, and how active that is. That'll determine whether or not this is the break that finally establishes itself.
No, exactly. It's the Chartreuse of Selignac. It's an old monastery that's in the Chartreuse Mountains. The Jura Mountains are the northern of the Western Alps, separating France and Switzerland. And this was an old monastery of the Carthusians that was eventually, only quite recently, they left it out. Then it was taken over and made into a hotel.
In 2001, they essentially gave up, hoping that they could recruit more monks. And now it's a hotel.
Ramūnas Navadauskas in second place there, the Lithuanian national champion, who's seen drifting around the front the last few Ks, and he's a bit of a dark horse. Obviously, Cannondale Drapac, Pierre Rolland is no longer their primary objective, because we saw for the first week Ramūnas Navadauskas really looking after him. But now he's been given cut loose and he can go and chase his own stage. Now, he is a big rider, and you would say that this would perhaps be too hard for him, but he did win Liège-Bastogne-Liège as an under-23, and on his day he can do some pretty magic things, especially when he's allowed to race, because normally he's such a loyal domestique that he never gets the opportunity.
Navadauskas is there.
Tony Gallopin there moving for Lotto Soudal, so he's accelerating, pushing it forward. It's
Angel Vicioso from Katusha. One of the Astana riders, definitely not either Fabio Aru, obviously, or Vincenzo Nibali on this occasion. I think it might be Jakob Fuglsang, is it? From Astana. And still they pile forward. There's a glimpse of the yellow jersey surrounded by Geraint Thomas from Team Sky and one or two others.
White jersey.
Still they're racing pretty hard.
White jersey following as well, so they're sort of sticking together in the middle of the pack. The big GC contenders at the moment, they'll be relying on their teams to cover and protect. We haven't seen Sky move forward yet, because they know at the moment so many other teams are racing and under orders to mark each other and make sure they don't miss this move, that Team Sky don't really need to do anything. The other teams are doing the work for them.
Well, Tony Gallopin's got a little bit of an advantage here, and Ramūnas Navadauskas is trying to close the gap. Nothing has got away just yet, and you can see they're continuing to pile off the front. So it's all still in flux. The real climbing, though, that hasn't begun yet. That starts fairly soon, in the next 2 kilometres to be precise. We'll get another short break out of the way, and when we return, they will be on the first climb of the day. Welcome back. A glimpse of the beautiful meandering River Aisne. But Alexis Villermoz is the next man from AG2R La Mondiale to push the pace at the front. And look who he's got on his wheels. Serge Pauwels, who disputed victory with Thomas de Gendt on Chalet Reynard. And that man, Vincenzo Nibali, is also on the move again. His second attack of the day. They're not alone, though, and they certainly haven't got away. And there's a showing of Rafa Majka's jersey for Tinkoff as well. Last time we saw his immediate rival in the polka dot jersey, Thomas de Gendt, for the King of the Mountains competition, he was right at the back of the peloton and clearly paying for those early efforts. So Majka might well have played a very astute tactical game here.
Well, it was an astute game he played, because Thomas de Gendt obviously knew that the only chance he had of securing that jersey was being in a break that distanced itself from the peloton before this climb. Majka took the other decision. He decided he'd wait, hedge all his bets on this climb, and no matter what was going, he'd then move here. So that's worked well for him. In the meantime, Thomas de Gendt's off the back. But we've also got, I think, the first riders drop from even before this climb with Greg Henderson and Dylan Groenewegen. So we're already seeing a lot of riders in trouble, as we can see here. This is...
Well, Lars Bak, that's understandable. He did a huge long ride yesterday into that headwind, pretty much on his own for Lotto Soudal, and he's popped straight away off the back.
Tony Martin there sitting in the car. So we've seen some big names. Distance at Greipel, we can just see there hanging on at the back. Is that Navarro?
No, he's the team leader, Navarro. Yeah.
Yeah, there's Andre Greipel, and Majka himself moves now, so Villermoz is going with him, so he's the only guy that can stay with him at the moment. Was that Quintana?
I didn't see it. There's a Movistar rider there, but let's have a little look next time we get back to the front. In the meantime, Andre Greipel is labouring up this climb, and it's doing so much damage so quickly here. Just praying that at some point the race gets shut down in front of him and he can get back on, because that's very early for a Gruppetto to form on the first of 6 climbs of the day.
Well, no Gruppetto will form now, and that's why everyone just keeps pushing on to at least halfway through the stage. Mark Cavendish himself, yesterday's winner. So what will happen is they'll try and stick in a group, but no one's going to wait at the moment. Nobody calls Gruppetto because it's far too early. If they shut it down now, then they will be outside the delay. So they're going to have to ride as hard as they can for another 60, 70 kilometres, and probably end up being, if they drop this early, they're going to have to ride hard the whole day.
Looked like Julian Alaphilippe was one of those riders, just caught off the back in the company of Mark Cavendish, etc. Still, if that's the case, hurting from his spectacular fall on the individual time trial. Still, Rafa Majka and Alexis Villermoz force the pace at the front.
It's a Movistar rider there in the third.
I don't think it's Quintana. It's not Nairo Quintana. No. mirror shades and the same blue kit, but the Colombian
done up.
has not gone. We're expecting big things from that team today, and not just from Movistar as well. Astana and BMC and Movistar, this is a real opportunity to them, almost a responsibility for them to do something.
It's interesting the different tactics we've seen from Thomas de Gendt, who covered all those early moves and now is in the red. He obviously knew he wouldn't be able to challenge Majka when it came to his climb, whereas Majka was just simply knew what he was doing. That's been his tactic, that as soon as they hit this climb and it started to stretch out and go into pieces, then he'd move.
Big rider coming across for Katusha. Ilnur Zakarin is going to join Alexis Villamoz and Rafa Majka pretty soon. I'm fairly sure that's him, unzipped and climbing extremely fast. He's opened up a big gap on that group with Vincenzo Nibali. Alexis Villamoz has been popped off by the pace of Rafa Majka.
So Zakarin's the perfect attack breakaway companion to have in this situation for Majka. He knows he can climb, he knows he can time trial.
He's a potential stage winner right there, isn't
exactly. So Majka, but he's not going to look around and wait at the moment. Majka will simply he's going to set his pace and take it up to the top of the climb. Luke Rowe in difficulties, which you would expect. This wouldn't have been a day, I don't think the team would have expected Luke Rowe to be able to contribute much today. He's contributed so much in all the other stages, the flatters, the crosswind days, the first week, and no doubt this is one of the days, if he could, then he would, but I doubt the team expected him able to.
A glimpse of the sprinter for Direct Energie, Brian Coquard, the latest of the fast men to be moving backwards as the bunch continues to accelerate forwards. Movistar beginning to lose men as well. Imanol Erviti, not expected to live with the best in the mountains. He's more the man charged with looking after Nairo Quintana in the flat roads, but he has gone already from the front of the race.
Saw John Degenkolb as well, slipping back there before from Giant Alpecin, who did a great ride yesterday, being up there in the sprint. That's the first we've seen him in a long time. There's Ramunas Navadauskas, who we saw earlier. So all the riders that were in those first moves are paying heavily for those, which you'd expect. They put themselves in the red, far into the red, trying to get in the break in the hope they'll get the gap before the climb. But if they don't, it puts them in massive trouble when they hit this. There's Kirienka leading here. So some Sky riders getting popped out, but it is they're strong flatmen, if you like. Kirienka, Luke Rowe, Ian Stannard we haven't seen yet, but it would be no surprise whatsoever for him to be distance.
Little surprising to see Kirienka go backwards on the first climb of the day.
A little surprising, but at the same time he can go a bit hot and cold in the mountains, Kirienka. He's can be amazing, and sometimes equally he's not.
I wonder if this is Mikkel Landa. There's the green jersey of Peter Sagan and Frank Schleck alongside him. Another Sky Domestique was just in front of those two, and it'd be interesting to see who he was.
And this is the tactic you'd use if you wanted to put Team Sky under pressure and try and isolate Chris Froome early, which is what you'd want to do. That's the only chance you stand at the moment in the race. You can't necessarily beat him individually. So what you need to do is beat him as a team. You need to destroy his team and look at it as stretching apart and ripping apart. So it's up to the other GC teams, Movistar, BMC, Trek Segafredo, to pile as much pressure on now and try and decimate the Team Sky team, and so leave Chris Froome with only 2 domestiques, maybe 3, to get him through the stage, in which case you keep attacking to the point you'd hope with 50 Ks to go he's only got 1 teammate left, and then it becomes a tactical game, and even Chris Froome would find it very difficult to fend off 3 or 4 riders on his own. But that's up to the teams. You have to have that. It's so easy to talk about that. You have to have an incredibly powerful team or an alliance amongst teams, which sometimes happens without you even realising, in order to break Team Sky.
Indeed. The River Aisne is crossed today, and so too is the source of the River Rhône, high up in the Alps. That's where we're heading. So the graphic you saw on your screen a little while ago was incorrect. That is Ilnur Zakarin with Rafa Majka. Alexis Villamoz has dropped off the pace, so these two excellent climbers, in fact some of the best in the world, are forcing the pace, and they have a clear advantage heading towards the top of the Col du Bertillon. 6k in total, 8.1% the average gradient, and they go over the top at 137 kilometers, so 2.3 kilometers to go, and these two have clear grey tarmac.
Look at Majka, who just Zakarin did his turn, then pulled off, and Majka almost did a little signal with his head like, no, you have to do more than that. But I don't think there's many people in the world that could ride with Majka at this particular moment in time. Although Zakarin did bridge across, he'll be paying for that. But Majka's looking reasonably serene at the moment, considering the scale of the effort he's making.
This is the response. Skabu Grumai is towards the front. So too is Serge Pauwels from Dimension Data.
Jerome Coppel as well. That's it. Wilco Kelderman.
He's having another bad day.
He is. It's obviously the second half of the tour is not going his way in the slightest.
His form isn't there, and his confidence, by his own admission, has been blown apart by that pretty disastrous time trial that saw him drop right out of contention at the top end of the general classification, which is a shame for Team Lotto Jumbo and for Wilco Kelderman.
Angelo Vicioso. You can see there's just lots of little groups now, groups of 10 riders, 12 riders. And is that Ian Stannard on the front of there, pushing? Which, again, it's very surprising if so, and goes to show how strong he is. Yes, it is, Ian Stannard. So even after his big crash, he's pushing on and he's doing his job, because he will want to try and get back onto this group, because if a break goes, it will start to settle down. The peloton will find its state for at least the next 50 Ks, and at which point that's when Ian Stannard can be used, because it will be a steadier state riding and he'll be able to make it over the climbs.
Well, Ilnur Zakarin, last time we saw him on a Grand Tour was going down a huge descent in the Dolomite Mountains of the Giro d'Italia, and we didn't actually see the crash, but we saw the aftermath and a broken collarbone. But at the time, a dreadful crash for Zakarin. It looked much, much worse. He was immobile by the side of the road and obviously had to abandon the Giro d'Italia. But he's a huge talent, and in his own right, Ilnur Zakarin, he's not a youngster. What is he now, 28 or so? But he is a Grand Tour winner prospect in waiting almost.
Well, it seems that there's a whole new generation coming through, and he's come about quite quickly. We'll yet to see in the next few years. If in the next 2 years, it needs to have some more results ready to back that up. But yeah, judging by that first big result, that definitely would indicate that. Not one of the most stylish riders, that's for sure, as Navarro goes. So Navarro needs to go, because he's one of the Cofidis rider on the front there, because now with Thomas de Gente's distance, that's the only competitor that Rafa Majka has directly for the Mountains jersey at the moment. So Navarro needs to go. It was interesting as well, Adam Yates was up there at the bottom of that shot just there, so he's up there near the yellow jersey, just sitting pretty as usual, not really moving, riding a clever race.
Looks like some order is being restored in the GC group, the group of favourites of the yellow jersey. You saw Nairo Quintana moving up to the wheel of Chris Froome, and the white jersey of Adam Yates is still there. So too is Bauke Mollema. These two riders have a little advantage, but there are, what, a dozen riders still on the road trying to get across to them.
Yeah, and that's why at the moment Majka isn't going to wait for anybody. He's going to hope they can get it up to him. So he'll just keep his pace up to the top, knowing it's causing destruction behind, and it's weeding out the strong from the weak, because he only wants strong riders with him now, hence why he's pushed it so hard. He's got Zakarin, because he needs the riders that can go with him the distance and get him through the majority of this stage.
Yeah.
Nibali is one of those types of riders. Serge Powell's, we know. Winner O'Connor, who was in that crash a few days ago, so that's going to be a bit of a loss to Movistar, the fact that he's suffering, because he is one of their strong mountain domestiques.
Not having the best of days, but he's not off this peloton completely and hopelessly just yet, because the pace isn't going to be maintained like this all the way, and all these riders who are just a little bit off the back will hope and believe, and probably will be able to get back on the descent as and when this eventually relaxes.
No, exactly. This is the yellow jersey group we're seeing here, so that's where Adam Yates saw Roman Kreuziger. So they're sort of the third group on the road. We have these two riders here, then we have the chase group, which is with Nibali and those other riders we saw just before, but that seems to be growing into a group of about 20 already. So it'll be interesting to see if riders keep firing off that yellow jersey group, and if at some point Team Sky are forced to take it back under control, because it's in that situation that they might, a GC rider, it's their opportunity to slip into the big move.
Only about 500 metres to go for Rafa Majka, and there was a little nod there, a little exchange of words between the two of them. Ilnur Zakarin is not a player in the King of the Mountains competition, and I think it was just a question of Rafa Majka ensuring that he's not going to compete for him for the maximum points over the top of the Col du Bertillon, and I doubt he will, because these two have to work harmoniously together to maintain their 24-second advantage. In a few hundred metres, we'll find out the truth of that, though, as Jérôme Coppel continues to head a group trying to get across, and it's quite sizable.
I think that might be Steph Clement now.
Oh, yeah, Coppel, yeah, it's no longer Coppel. Nibali goes, and there's a reaction from Serge Powell. So this is the third time that we've seen Nibali attacking and trying to get across, and he's decided now's the time to do it. Don't forget how brilliant a descender he is, Vincenzo Nibali as well. Rafa Majka and Ilnur Zakarin, less so.
No, exactly. Majka can look after himself, but Zakarin definitely does look a little bit ungainly when it comes to descents. But this is a steep descent, and they're going to come off this and straight into the next climb.
So, Rafa Majka takes 10 points in that competition, and he is now on 87 points, and he's just 3 points behind the polka dot jersey of Thomas de Gendt, assuming that de Gendt isn't in this group, which he isn't. So this is the sprint for third in the King of the Mountains competition over the first climb of the day. And look at Nibali go. He's decided here's where he needs to attack on the descent, and let's see how quickly he gets across to Ilnur Zakarin and Rafa Majka up the road.
And this is always the tactic of the great descenders. They try and get that little gap over the top, because if they can do that, that means that they can push on at their speed. If they have a rider on their wheel, it's very difficult to drop them because they just follow the lines and follow your braking. Team Sky seems to be totally in control, and you can see they've lifted the pace there. There's too many riders in front. They're going to start to get a bit more control of that. But that looked like 5 riders.
Yeah,
so
5 men.
So
hugely dominant in terms of numbers of any team. No other team has anything like 5 riders at the front end of that main group of favourites. A group which we expect to swell on the descent. 1 climb down, David. 5 to go. That was good racing.
And that's 5 classified ones. They've got another 5, well, there's 6k climb after this, which isn't even classified. Then they go up a Cat 2, which is 8.8 kilometers at 5.6%. Then they have another 7k climb, the Col de Pisloup, 4.9 kilometers at 5.8 kilometers. Then another one at 5.4% for 5k. So, and that's all within the first 79 kilometers before they hit the big climbs, the mountains, the 2 mountains.
Majka and Zakarin on the descent. Just going back to the Giro d'Italia and the accident that befell this man, forcing him to abandon. I said it earlier, it was in the Dolomites. It wasn't actually. It was in the French Alps, funnily enough, when the race crossed over into France. It was on the descent into Risoul. That's where he did the damage. It was the same descent that actually did for Steven Kruijswijk, who was leading the Giro d'Italia. And even though he completed it, it was Nibali who took advantage on that day. And he's the man who's on the attack now. So Ilnur Zakarin might be spooked slightly by what happened to him on that day, and he's attacking this descent. He's going to have to stay away in the company of Rafa Majka. But I wonder if riders in the back of their mind will have flashbacks of what's happened. It was only in May, and it was a brutal fall.
I think every rider has a different ways of overcoming those. If it was a crash that wasn't your fault, sometimes you can get over that quicker because you can justify it and rationalise it. But if you're going too fast,
pilot error.
Yeah, if it was pilot error, then you get the yips a bit.
Well, Vincenzo Nibali is a rider who most determinedly never gets the yips, and he is flying off the front, trying to join a high-powered breakaway that's forming on the descent from the Col du Bertillon. Rafa Majka and Ilnur Zakarin have an advantage over the rest of the race, and for now the yellow jersey group has his men around him, and he's pretty pleased with what's developing on the road ahead of him. Well, if the next 130 kilometres of racing are anything like the first 30 of the day, we're in for an absolute treat, because it still hasn't entirely settled down. There is a group of riders up the road, but still, well, now actually for the first time, maybe it looks like they've shut down. The yellow jersey's gone to the front with his team. But the group up the road, we haven't got a total grasp of exactly who's up the road just yet. Haven't got all the numbers away. The green jersey has been on the attack, but he is back alongside Adam Yates in the white jersey and Chris Froome in the yellow jersey, Peter Sagan. But there's a big group of riders ahead of them, and they've got a minute's advantage from the very front of that group. On the descent, Vincenzo Nibali caught Rafa Majka and Ilnur Zakarin fairly comfortably, and here are the names then. Nelson Oliveira is there, Tanel Kangat, a teammate of Vincenzo Nibali's for Astana, as Mikel Nieve just comes to a halt, and he'll be fine. Chris Froome's got a lot of men looking after him. Nieve's one of them, and I'm sure he'll be able to get back on to the front of that group pretty quickly, as that will start to swell in size now. You saw a group that had been distanced on the climb, and the pace dropping here, that will allow the peloton to swell.
And this is perfect for Team Sky, because obviously they're in control of the pace now. They've decided that this group that we see on the road doesn't pose any threat GC-wise. It's a lot of strong riders in there. We can see Thomas Vauclair down at Pierre Rolland on the left. There's Nibali, there's Majka, Serge Pauwels, Oliveira, Ruben Plaza, and Zakharin. So there's a lot of pedigree in here, but no clear and present GC threat. So Sky would have slowed the pace behind, and we saw that shot of Niébi, 2 more of Sky domestics getting on. I don't know, it was Kirienka and Ian Stannard. Which is perfect for Team Sky, because that means they can save all their climbers for later on in the race, because if they get back on, and if Luke Rowe gets back on as well, they can put Luke Rowe, Ian Stannard and Kirienka back just on pacing, steady control behind this group until they need the climbers to start closing gaps and basically controlling the GC riders who do and may potentially attack Chris Froome.
Yeah, there's no mistaking Thomas Voeckler in about 5th position, bobbing around, the only rider at the moment standing up out of his saddle, unzipped but wearing a vest.
Peter Sagan there. So Peter Sagan, I'm sure, would have wanted to be in that group, but we can see even Peter Sagan wasn't able to make it in there, because that was a significant climb, and the race pace would have been so high into it that I think even he was it was stretching his abilities.
Peter Stettner, the American for Trek Segafredo, who's riding, I think, his first Tour de France. Delighted to be here. Just dropping back. Trek. Oh, they're looking after Bauke Mollema today. Now, interestingly, BMC, who looked so full of attacking in the early 30 kilometres of this race, don't think they've got a rider up the road after all of that, so it was all for nothing in the end.
Which is a massive mistake on their part. You see they're wearing the yellow helmets as leaders of the team classification, so they need to have at least 2 riders in that group in order to protect that lead and even enhance it, because the time's taken on the first 3 riders each stage, and if a move like this goes, it's potentially, it gives a team a big advantage. Although there aren't many teams they're competing against at the moment. There's BMC Racing are leading Movistar by 2 minutes 30, which isn't that much at this point in the race, but Movistar have a rider up there.
2 riders.
2 riders up there, so that would put them potentially, if they can hold this, that break makes it, or those 2 riders make it to finish ahead of this group, that would put them in the lead of the Team GC.
Stettner bringing water bottles up to Bauke Mollema alongside the peloton on the right-hand side, just looking for a bit of space. Yeah, Movistar have got 2 riders in the break, and so too have Astana, Tanel Kangad and Vincenzo Nibali. And that's a pattern you see repeated on stage races on Grand Tours, and especially from those 2 teams. Seems to be in the DNA of their tactics, both Movistar and Astana, that they will send some of their strongest men up the road in breaks, and it will be a dual ambition. If it all gets away, they can contest in their own right a stage win, but if it comes back together, they can work for their team leaders in general classification.
No, exactly, and this is also, it's a stage like this where we really miss Alberto Contador, because over and over again in stage races, when he's been on the back foot and in 2nd, 3rd, 4th, even 5th on GC, on a stage like this, he launches a massive offensive by putting his teammates up the road in the group, as we've seen that front group, and then at some points in the race around halfway, he then attacks and bridges up and then uses the riders that were up there as his domestiques. But at the moment, we're not really seeing any of the other GC contenders even showing any signs of wanting to attempt to move like that, but that doesn't mean they're not going to do it, because that's always the best way of doing a move like that, is by catching everyone off guard and allowing a certain amount of complacency and then launching an offensive when nobody expects it.
Yeah, it's that time of day on the Tour de France where everything calms down in the GC group. Calls of nature are answered and everything settles down, but a frenetic 30 kilometres of racing, mostly uphill as well. Tough start to what is going to be a tough day, and many people actually, when asked in the peloton, as the gap is now measured at 2 minutes 30 to the breakaway, have suggested that even though it doesn't end with a big out-of-category summit finish, this is potentially the hardest day of racing.
Yeah, I think so. These are always the worst. Like I said, when it's the big mountains, you can break it up a little bit easier, and you can understand what's going to happen. If there's 3 big mountain passes of 20 kilometers each, yeah, you've just got to make it over the first one, not too far off the front peloton, and then on the second one, a gruppetto will form, and then you just ride in steady state. It's the racing, oddly, is quite controlled, but on a day like this, it's much harder, because this front group on the road, then you've got the peloton, and then all those little groups, the stragglers behind, will slowly congregate into one group. That will take a long time, because at the moment it's self-preservation. Each straggling group is doing its own time trial to get as close, to try and get back onto that main gruppetto, and they won't let that go until they feel safe that they're close enough to the finish line to sit up and ride in a bit steadier, and all just finish in the delay. But it's at that point that all the groups start coming together, all the stragglers group together, and the gruppetto forms. But a gruppetto on a day like this doesn't form instantaneously. It takes dozens and dozens of kilometres, maybe 3 hours to form.
Tom Dumoulin is a giant Alpecin rider, and he's on the move, so that's a move to watch. Remember him winning from a breakaway. There is Dumoulin in the white jersey, just going through the shot. Yeah, very interesting to see what he does today, because last time he got himself in a move on a big mountain stage, he won, and that was up to Andorra Arcalis.
No, and clearly he's on a scintillating form at the moment, and probably just having fun. There's no stress. There's no pressure anymore. They don't have any GC ambitions necessarily anymore, because their leader Warren Barguil is in 16th overall, 15th, 16th overall, and Tom Dumoulin has probably, the whole team's probably been given a certain carte blanche to race, to win stages and to do what they want, because he's alleviated the pressure from the sponsors by winning 2 stages, and also himself and what everyone knows is his build-up for the Olympics.
As we look at the Cerdon caves, les grottes de Cerdon. 2 million years ago, at the beginning of the Quaternary period, an immense lake covered a great part of this region, and the waters from several rivers carved out these caves. And human occupation, which is traced right the way back to 7,000 BC, finally came to an end in, well, even as late as the Middle Ages, where it served as a refuge for lepers.
So you can see Team Sky almost have their full complement of riders, which is great for them, not so great for the competition, if you like, from the other GC riders, because they can see simply how strong it is, and that will hold them off attacking until later. If Sky were in trouble now already, then teams would attack and try to put it under even more stress, which is one of the reasons why many of those Team Sky riders, even when they're dropped, they have to battle back on. Simply, if nothing else, they've got to do their job, but also dominate psychologically the rest of the teams in the races.
Well, we've got over the Col du Bertillon. Next up on the menu, it's the Col du Sapel. They start climbing at 116.8 kilometres to go. The Cat 2 climb, that's next up. Welcome back. The wind has died down, the sun is out, it is roasting hot in the Jura Mountains today, and that will be a factor for some of the riders. The first time, genuinely, on this Tour de France, which has been moderate in terms of temperature, that it is properly sweltering. And with the wind dropping, particularly on the southern-facing climb of the Colombier, David, you think that might be a factor, because they go up it twice, and the last 2 big climbs are on different routes up and down that mountain?
Yeah, when they come up the super category Grand Colombier, the north-facing side, it is in the forest and is quite protected, and it'll be quite easy to forget that when you drop down, cool off, then if you don't drink enough and get ready, that coming up the final climb up the south-facing side of Colombier, it will be scorchio hot. So that's something that might catch some riders off guard, and for riders like Chris Froome and Quintana, that's something that's never been a problem for them. So for them, that will be an advantage. For many others, it won't be. And you see Orica Bike Exchange, they're doing a good job as well. They're surrounding Adam Yates. We see a few, he's got 3 riders in front of him, 1 behind. Team Sky, we can see how it's forming slightly now. We've got Team Sky there, then the second team on GC, well, second individual, Bauke Mollema. He's got his whole team behind Team Sky, as we see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 riders. Then third on GC, Orica Bike Exchange, third team on the road. That's often what happens. They assume their positions in that line out according to their team leader's place on GC.
30 riders up the road, and they've got an advantage of 4 minutes and 5 seconds. Just looking down the list of riders involved in that breakaway, as now the race has stabilised, and we can analyse just who's made the selection today and is off with a good chance of contesting a stage victory among them, these 30 riders today. None of them are a threat in the general classification, which is why, by definition, they've been allowed to go. And I have already counted 6 stage winners on the Tour de France before. There may be more that I've missed, but on an initial glance, I'm looking at Pierre Rolland, who has won before, on the Tour de France. Vincenzo Nibali, of course he has, and he's won the race overall. Tom Dumoulin, who's already won twice on this edition of the Tour de France. Rafa Majka, again a two-time winner in 2014 of the Tour of stages on the mountain stages of the Tour de France. Ruben Plaza, he's an interesting man, the Portuguese rider for Orica Bike Exchange, because he actually won a not totally dissimilar stage last year ahead of Peter Sagan.
No, it's true. There are a few riders in that move who could potentially win this. They're not just in it for mountains classification or doing domestique work. And yeah, Nibali's one of those. Pierre Rolland, Dumoulin has already won a stage here. Even maybe Alaphilippe, if he's on a good day. Vauclair, we also know in the past, we haven't seen it for a while. This would have been the sort of stage where he would have excelled. It's very similar to the Pyrenean stage into Luchon, where he has won. So there are definitely plenty of riders in here that realistically will be racing for the stage win. But we can see after the peloton, well, Team Sky decided that move was safe for them regards their GC battle. They let it go. They lifted the pace completely. They lifted their foot off the pedal, if you like, and allowed everyone to regroup, including the teammates that were dropped in, Stannard, Lucro, Kirienka, who we now see riding on the front of that group. But it does mean that at one point it was in pieces, the peloton, and now it's almost back together completely. 153 riders, only one rider off the back, Movistar Herrada, and the 30 riders in front. So we've now found some order again to what's going on.
That fantastic waterfall in the Jura Mountains as we begin to gain altitude all the way to the finishing line, up and over these big lumps, part of the Alpine Massif, but often referred to as a completely separate mountain range, the Jura Mountains. And again, spectacularly different scenery, heavily wooded, dense forests. The best placed rider in the general classification who's gone up the road is actually Sebastian Reichenbach from FDJ, and he's, I say only, but he's 11 minutes and 41 down, which does imply, or it suggests, or it actually tells us that this breakaway will not be allowed the 25-30 minute kind of advantage that it might otherwise be, as you often get on stages deep into a Grand Tour like this, because he's too close.
No, for sure. I mean, Team Sky aren't going to simply let the yellow jersey go, even if he wouldn't pose much of a threat, if you like, when we have the upcoming mountain stages. But at the same time, it allows them to give a reason objective. So 11 minutes, I'd be surprised if we see it go much over 6 or 7 minutes, to be honest, as they seem to have already stabilised. It went up above 4 minutes, and now Team Sky is setting a pace that's already brought that down slightly. So they're clearly intending to keep it, make the day hard. Not overly hard, but they want to make it hard, because that obviously benefits Chris Froome and make it easier to control for them if they can have everybody on the rivet all day, and then we saw on Ventoux simply how strong the mountain domestiques of Wout Poels, was a Liège-Bastogne-Liège winner, and was one of the strongest climbers as we saw on Ventoux. To have him as a domestique, which Chris Froome does, it means that they're in a very powerful position.
Which means if you're a betting man, it's a tough call as to whether any of these very strong riders, as they are, will actually be allowed to win the stage today, because if David's correct, and I'm sure that's about right, they won't be allowed much more than 6 minutes of advantage. That can disappear pretty quickly if there's a big GC race behind them on the two ascents of the Colombier, if not before.
No, and it's also, we can see that now that the really hard bit of racing, which we don't get to see often, those first 45 minutes hour where it was flat out, then it finds the groups get formed. This group has been formed. It was forced by Majka, if you like, on that first Cat 1 with Zakharin. They really forced the pace and made the race rip to pieces in order to get back up to them. And there were only 28 other riders that made it up to them, and that's these guys here, this group of 30. Now, once that was formed, that's when Team Sky, they were satisfied. They shut it down, let the gap go, allowed everyone behind to catch back on. But that took 45 minutes of racing in order for that order to be found. Now what will happen is this group, the peloton sat up slightly. I'm sure this group is sitting up a bit easy. They've done their hard bit. They're having a sort of a semi-rest. And then at some point, if this gap starts coming down too quickly and it's not working, we'll see it attacking again from this group. So almost treat this as another peloton, which is going to have another race kick-off to make it smaller and make it more efficient.
And the advantage is only 3:58, 3:59, so it's being kind of held at 4 minutes. bad day for Thomas de Gendt so far. He started with all the right ambitions on his polka dot bike there in his polka dot jersey to try and secure his lead and extend his lead, but it's all backfired on the man from Lotto Soudal who won up to Chalet Renard. He's just hanging on to the back of the favourites at the moment, and he is watching his lead in that mountains competition disappear. Already Rafa Majka has taken maximum points over the first climb of the day, and if Majka takes, well, only second place, he draws level over the next climb with Thomas de Gendt in the overall polka dot jersey standings. That's the situation out on the road, though. 4 minutes and 3 seconds the advantage. Welcome back. There is a bike race passing by a scene of great importance in this region. The memorial of the Aisne-Maquis, this area of the Département de l'Aisne, to the resistance. Marks the site where 52 houses were destroyed by the German army in July 1944, and is a memorial to the many civilian maquisard victims killed in combat in this canton. There's 112.3 kilometres to run. The breakaway group of 30 riders has an advantage of 4 minutes and 28 seconds. Thomas Voeckler, what's he got in store for us today to entertain? Pierre Rolland, well, he'll be frustrated with his Tour de France so far. In his new team colours for Cannondale Drapac, and yet to really get involved. And there's another team who will be a little bit frustrated with the opening kilometres of today's stage 15 of the Tour, and that's BMC. Tried so hard to get a rider up the road and in the break, and as Wout Poels looks across to the BMC train, they'll be reflecting on a job only half done so far. They'll have to make good on their tactics today and revert to a new plan, because that one didn't work.
No, we saw them cover the first attacks, Marcus Burkhardt, and first it was weather, the hope that maybe they were going to place riders up the road to do the classic set riders up and then have your leader bridge up to them. But I think probably equally it was to do with the fact they had team orders to make sure they didn't miss the break, because they are, with their yellow helmets, you can see that signifies the fact they're leading the overall team classification. So it's imperative for them if they want to keep that, and they need to always have riders in breakaways.
Ethics Quickstep do have a rider in a breakaway, and that is Julien Alaphilippe today, who's abandoned any ambitions he had in terms of the general classification. Dan Martin is their man for GC still, but Julien Alaphilippe is trying to hunt himself down a stage win. Matteo Tossato, oldest man in the bike race. So Tinkoff have got themselves Rafa Majka on the march up the road. There's a little glimpse of Ruben Plaza for Orica Bike Edge, who might well play a canny game. Watch out for him and the way it unfolds today. Clever bike rider. Anyone who can get the better of a stage in which Peter Sagan finishes in second place knows how to handle themselves.
Well, for sure, I think we have Nibali in there as well, who'll be riding his own race. I think he's, now that Aru's drifted off GC as well, and there's not much Nibali can really do. I think he's probably up there more than anything to try and chase a stage win now. And no doubt he'll be watching, keeping an eye on Majka and also Tom Dumoulin. We know Tom Dumoulin's on incredible form, having already won 2 stages, 2 very different stages, a breakaway with mountaintop finish and also the individual time trial. So he's the rider you want to make sure you're in a break with, because you know he can power it. And Majka is a good guy to watch, because they know his vested interest today is scoring as many mountains points as he can. So they know he's committed to the long-term survival of this break. So each rider within that group of 30 will be choosing riders that they want to mark and make sure they don't let go.
The translation of those words means, where I die, the country is reborn. 111k to go, and for the first time the advantage goes out over 5 minutes, so they're being allowed a little bit more slack by Team Sky, who've got all their troops back in a line. We did see Vasil Kirienka and Ian Stannard dropped on the first climb, but as we anticipated, and you rightly pointed out, David, as soon as it was allowed to stabilise the pace, then they were comfortable enough in their efforts to get back on. and Stannard will do as much as he can in today's stage. How deep do you think the likes of Stannard and Rowe would be expected to ride on the 6 categorised climbs of the day, David?
Well, I think surprisingly far. I'd expect them to be able to get to the foot of the super category Grand Colombier.
That's the penultimate climb, isn't it?
Penultimate climb at 100 kilometres, because the difficulty they have is when the climbers are really attacking when it goes into that extreme high pace. But if it's steady state, as it is now, you call this steady state, and they're dictating the pace, they ride at within their capabilities. They will have their objective of making it to that 100 kilometre mark and then handing over to their superb mountain domestiques.
Peregrine falcons soar through the air on the thermals around these gorges. Big high cliffs of the Alberine Gorge. 7 kilometres in length. Heading off initially in an east-west direction, then going kicking round to a north-south direction. A natural monument in this part of the foothills of the Alps. Well, you can hardly call them hills, they're mountains, the Jura Mountains. The first real test in this final salvo of climbing that Christian Prudhomme has designed on the 2016 Tour de France. Everyone anticipated, I think, that this is where Nairo Quintana would start to strengthen, and Chris Froome, traditionally, historically, would start to weaken. But there's scant evidence that that's going to happen, I must say, David.
No, scant evidence, and I think everybody's already a little bit daunted by the fact Chris Froome came into this race saying that he changed all his training, his preparation to be peaking in the 3rd week, and yet he's already been peaking since the first stages. So, but maybe he hasn't. Maybe there's still more to come. But we'll see. We've always known that Nairo Quintana is better in the Alps. They're more suited to what he's grown up with, the very long Colombian climbs, and his slight build. It really is suited to the really long dragging out mountains. Right, the Pyrenees, they're long, but they're a slightly more explosive style of racing. So it's maybe he knows, but we did see on Ventoux he wasn't at his best when he was attacking. It wasn't making any difference, and then we saw a multitude of riders actually dropping him behind. So yeah, I think we're a little bit disappointed as we'd set such high expectations on him.
Nairo Quintana is a fascinating conundrum, so talented, so much promise, and the assumption has abounded widely over recent years that it's simply a matter of when he's going to win the Tour de France. And yet, on the evidence of the first 2 weeks of racing, that prospect, in the company of Chris Froome, who is now emerging as his great rival, seems more distant than ever. On the evidence of this Tour de France so far, Chris Froome has him tightly under control, and even tighter than his previous wins, which is something of a mystery. Who knows? Sometimes you get to the end of a bike race and you only find out later that actually they've been carrying a little bit of a virus, or they've been slightly undercooked, or there's been a bit of a physical conditioning problem that's affected them. Even a 10% or a 15% dip in what they're capable of doing, that's enough to lose a huge amount of time in the mountains.
No, they're already operating at close to 100%. And so the tiniest percentage lost has massive repercussions, and obviously as you said, the Team GC leaders who are battling against each other, if they are sick, they're not going to admit it to anybody outside the team, and sometimes not even within the team. Only the team doctor would know, and the team director sportif, and they try to keep it away from their teammates in order to not to damage their morale or risk them telling one of their friends from another team, and then the peloton being the peloton, word spreads like wildfire. So it can be quite a lonely illness for those guys when they get it, and because they're forced to simply be stoic about it and hope that nobody finds out, and that goes to show how psychological it all is as well. Because maybe if Quintana knew today, or word spread that Chris Froome had been up with a fever last night, then there'd be no holds barred. I don't think. I think people would be attacking when they wouldn't have been otherwise.
Yeah, it's brutal like that, isn't it? I mean, it's brutal in all sorts of ways, but finding out a sniff of weakness from your opponent, that's your opportunity. And you must exploit it. It's almost your professional duty to do that. Oh, a wonderful helicopter shot looking down on the peloton as they wind their way through the gorges. When we were in the Ardèche the other day for the time trial, we actually only noticed at the end of the day that we hadn't had those wonderful helicopter shots because the winds were so strong on that occasion they didn't dare, for safety reasons, put the helicopters up. But as a water bottle just bounces off the reservation, having been thrown by a rider not quite far enough.
This is also the situation of the race at the moment, is the dream scenario for all those sprinters and non-climbers, because no doubt their biggest fear was, and it would have been when they hit that Cat 1 and the brake hadn't gone early on, that was only 15, 16 Ks into the race, that it would continuously race at the front and the brake would take another 40, 50 Ks to go. But the brake was already gone by the top of that first Cat 1, which allowed then the peloton to regroup and get all those riders that were dropped were able to join back on, because otherwise they'd have had a very long day today in little groups trying to survive within the time delay.
This breakaway group is so large that sometimes you're not sure whether you're looking at the back of the peloton or the back of the breakaway, so to speak. 30 men have an advantage of 5:36, and pretty soon they're going to be going over the top of the Cat 2 Col du Sapel. 108 kilometres still to run, so they've just got 1 kilometre to go. The second climb of the day. Barely noticed them going uphill because the gradient actually has only been an average of 5.5% on this climb, even though it's 8.8 kilometres long. A little bit steeper clearly towards the top. Watch out for Rafa Majka. Where is he? He's going to want to take maximum points. That's what his day initially is all about, gaining a lead in the King of the Mountains competition.
And his only competitor in that group is Navarro, so Navarro normally you'd expect just those two riders to really be fighting it out, because they're the two that have such a distant lead on everybody else.
Dani Navarro from Cofidis in the red jersey, Rafa Majka for today in the yellow jersey of Tinkoff, but a very, very strong possibility that by the end of the day he'll be back in polka dot, which is a jersey he's worn in the 2014 Tour de France, and a competition he knows all about. Steve Cummings towards the back. Did briefly catch a glimpse of Steve Cummings not at the back earlier, which sent alarm bells ringing, and he was seen just temporarily attacking in the company of Serge Pauwels, but then Pauwels persisted and Cummings sat up, so he'll live to fight another day.
No, I think that was classic Steve Cummings. We'd seen him at the back, and then the race started to light up and moves were going, and at one moment we saw him attempting to bridge across to Majka and Zakharin, and I think he realised that today he didn't have the legs for it, so he shut it down and saved himself for another day, rather than battle on and find himself in a group where he knew that today there was an inevitability of him eventually being dropped.
No school today. Sunday in the Jura Mountains, come out and see a bike race, and the French public, the international public, let's face it, have duly responded. Now, here is the battle. Thomas Voeckler is on the front. And there in third position is Rafa Majka, who's the favourite to take points here, unless someone wants to come and spoil his party. Lotto Soudal might have an interest in doing that. But thinking about it, if they've got a rider in this breakaway move? Not sure they have after all that. So Rafa Majka might find Dani Navarro his genuine and only competition as they head ever closer to the top of this climb, the Col du Sapel. 5 points on offer for the winner, 3 for second place, 2 and 1. So the first 4 riders over the line score. Pierre Rollon's not interested for Cannondale Drapac, and allows a little gap to open up to Bartosz Szarski, Ruben Plaza in the blue of Orica Bike Exchange. And Thomas Voeckler has decided to come and irritate Rafa Majka and get himself a bit of camera time, bit of exposure, and a few mountains points. So Voeckler, it looks like, he's going to take 5 points. Rafa Majka will take second place, and Serge Pauwels looks as though he's the rider to cross the line in third place, taking 2 points. By my calculations now, Thomas de Gendt and Rafa Majka are level on 90 points. And at this point, there are still 44 King of the Mountains points available. My correction, 39 King of the Mountains points available. So plenty more Mountains points to scrap for, and that's not your final standings by the end of the day at all. Rafa Majka, though, very much driving that competition on now, and is strong favourite to be the King of the Mountains at the end of the day. Mark Cavendish, well, he's still in contact, has targeted his next ambition after yesterday's dramatic stage win number 4 of the outside chance of a bunch sprint tomorrow on Nelson Mandela Day. And of course he rides these days for a South African team, and it matters hugely to their sponsors that they show their colours to the best of their ability tomorrow. And it is a chance. I'm not sure how tomorrow will play out, but I think it's probably a 50-50 chance of being a bunch sprint at best.
And you saw his teammates there congregating around him. They'll be dropping back to look after him. And Bernie Eisler, as we often see, will stay with him through a whole mountain day if he's off the back. And now that we're further in the race and the break's gone and they don't have to put Tekla Hamanot or Steve Cummings up the road, they will leave them also with Bernie Eisler and Mark Cavendish. So, if you like, Mark Cavendish has a team of 3 for him today that will stick with him through anything, I imagine, to make sure he gets to the finish within the time delay.
All 9 of Team Sky's riders are there, including the yellow jersey, which is remarkable. Oh, now Mark Cavendish is dropping off the back a bit, looking laboured.
There's Bernie Eisler, his teammate in front of him, who's just slowed down with him. He could stay in that peloton quite easily, Bernie, at this point in the race, but he now will just make sure that he stays with Mark the whole time.
Why is it that sprinters can't climb? I mean, Mark Cavendish can climb, and he's always at pains to point out just how fast he goes, and the stats will back that up. You know, any amateur who thinks they could live with Mark Cavendish on a climb like this can forget it. But relative to this group, he struggles, and physiologically, how is that explicable? He's small, he's light.
Yeah, well, they have different physiology, so it's, his aerobic engine isn't quite as big as many of the others. He has an anaerobic engine, which is massive. Where he's always said when he does he's a wonderful lesson to many of those kids getting out there, getting to the sport young, boy or girl, who does the physiological testing and is told when they're 14 or 15 that they haven't got the engine to become a top athlete. If you tested Mark Cavendish when he was 14 or 15, you'd have said there's no way you can become a top athlete. He broke all the rules, and I think that's a great lesson to everybody. Because psychologically he's so strong, and then he doesn't panic. He's in this situation, he knows what his body can and can't do, and he can't run at such a high aerobic level, so he has to go what it can operate at, and that's slower than the other guys. Now for some of the other sprinters, it's simply a case of the sheer size and weight. Marcel Kittel, he's such a big unit, around 90 kilograms or so. It's very difficult for him. The amount of power he has to develop to go up a mountain, it's incredibly inefficient. And the optimum sort of weight for a GC contender is the high 60s, probably around 68 to 70 kilos, and they're the ones that are complete all-rounders, can time trial, can climb, can even get by in the crosswinds if needs be. But no, the sprinters do have a much different physiology.
They are descending off the Col du Sapel, but not for long. At 101.4 kilometres, they start to go uphill again for pretty much 5k, and it's another Cat 3, well, it's the first Cat 3 climb of the day, 5 kilometre climb at nearly 6% gradient. That's the next one, and it's only 3 kilometres, or 2.5 in fact, up the road before it kicks uphill again. This is precisely what Chris Froome meant as we get about there not being any flat roads today, when he was interviewed before the flag dropped and the stage got underway today. So Danny Navarro picks up 1 point. Rafa Majka picks up 3, and they're the 2 big players up the road in the King of the Mountains competition.
Sad to hear that Jesus Gerardo has stopped the race.
Has
he was
he?
one of the first dropped, and apparently had a fever last night, and that would explain it.
That's another important man gone from Movistar. Jesus Gerardo, wonderfully talented Spanish rider, won a brilliant stage on the Dauphiné. Hasn't perhaps been at his very best on this tour, but many of Nairo Quintana's teammates have looked slightly undercooked. In fact, Nairo Quintana's looked slightly undercooked, so Movistar not peaking, but look at that massed outfit alongside and around Chris Froome at the moment. Look for signs of weakness, chinks in the armour, but you can look a long while and not come to any conclusions so far.
Navarro forcing it on slightly, so that's interesting. You may already be thinking that this group's a little bit too big to manage, and you'd like to separate it out, get the strongest riders up ahead.
So Yarlinton Pantana, the Colombian for IM Cycling, is trying to bring the rest of the field across to Danny Navarro, which is of course kind of what he wants, but he wants only a small group. He wants riders to be dropped off the back and make it more manageable. And in an ideal world, Rafa Majka is one of those who drops away. Unlikely though that seems at the moment. Majka is a pure climber, and this is good terrain for him, and he's got a concrete ambition, which so far he's delivering on. 6 minutes and 7 seconds. The gap from the yellow jersey group to the men up the road. And this is roughly the ballpark as Team Sky lead them over the second climb of the day that you anticipated, David. You thought the group this size, and don't forget that Sebastian Reichenbach from FDJ is only 11 minutes 41 down in the general classification. They probably won't be allowed much more than 6 minutes, but who knows? Who knows how this might pan out? Stranger things have happened. Team Sky might want to play a game of bluff with those teams who are defending podium positions as well. Orica Bike Exchange and Trek Segafredo, who might suddenly look at Reichenbach and go, well, now we're going to have to ride.
No, exactly. And also the team classification, as we go into the third week, as teams' objectives change, let's say a team like BMC, who are so hoping for a great result, a podium on GC, and that seems to be slipping away, they might then change their forces and motivations towards making sure they win that team classification. And often Team Sky can profit off that, because all of a sudden you have a team come up and contribute to the chase because they're defending one of the objectives they're chasing.
All strung out through the pine forests of the Jura in baking sunshine. The race is on. 2 of 6 climbs have been negotiated, and they are descending towards the next climb of the day. It's a Category 3 Col de Pisseloup, and it's not far up the road. Welcome back. Under 100 kilometres to run. The breakaway group of 30 riders have an advantage that's gone over 6 minutes, but is now being held there by Team Sky, who've got all their men on the front looking after the yellow jersey. Now, one man who's sitting in a team car just ahead of the race, in between the main peloton and the breakaway group that we're looking at now, or just a bit further up the road, is the Cannondale Drapac Director Sportif, Charlie Wegelius, who I think we've got on the telephone. At least last time I spoke to him, we could hear him loud and clear. Charlie, are you there?
Hello everybody.
Hi, Charlie. Thanks for giving us a moment or two. I understand you're in the middle of a race, so you may have to hang up at any point. So far, we're 160k into the race. It was fast and furious for the first 30k, but you've got the job half done because you've placed 3 of your best riders up the road.
Yeah, it's a stage that we've been looking at, and we made a very positive start. But as I'm sure everybody can see at home, there's a lot of really good cyclists in this breakaway, and there's a lot of work still to do, but I think we made a good start.
Now, Pierre Rolland, for the viewers who may only watch the Tour de France, might be the only bike race they watch through the year, is a name that will be very familiar to them. We saw him attacking on Mont Ventoux the other day, but Dylan van Baarle and Tom Jelte-Slachter maybe less so. What are their capabilities, those 2 riders?
I'm afraid I didn't hear your question. It's breaking up. Sorry.
If you can still hear me, Charlie, I'll try again. Dylan van Baarle and Tom Jelte-Slachter, tell us a little bit about what those men are capable of on a stage like today. And answer came there none. Sadly, that's just the way we try our luck with these things, but he is in a car going through the Jura Mountain, so it's understandable if reception drops in and out. What we did get from Charlie Wegelius, though, is I think a sense of satisfaction, David Miller, that finally, Cannondale Drapac have got 3 of their best in a breakaway move, and if Charlie couldn't answer that question, let me ask you that question. Dylan van Baarle, winner of the Tour of Britain a couple of years ago, and Tom Jelte-Slachter is another really exciting prospect.
Yeah, they're brilliant riders. Dylan van Baarle is very much a classic specialist, and Tom Jelte-Slachter is, we've seen at Paris-Nice, also the Ardennes, he was such an amazing prospect, and if you like, they're both primarily classics riders, one-day racers. Dylan van Baarle mainly for the cobble classics in Flanders, and Tom Jelte-Slachter for the Ardennes and for those really punchy uphill finishes. So if you like, today this would be a bit beyond both of them, but so they'll be very much on on domestic duty for Pierre Rolland in that break to make sure that he doesn't miss any splinters off the front, to keep powering it forward and to keep him stocked up with drinks and food, etc. So it's they've almost got a mini team up there, which is what you want if you want to go for the stage. And if Rolland, who is their only realistic prospect, if Tom Sakta, if he was going very well, would be. But again, as Charlie said, there are some such good bike riders in this group. Vincenzo Nibali, we got Rafa Majka. These are riders who, and Tom Dumoulin, who are proven on stages like this. Whereas Tom Sakta maybe isn't. Whereas Pierre Rolland has in the past. Well, we've seen him win on Alpe d'Huez. We know he can win mountain stages. So that's how it is. But yeah, Dylan van Baarle, he's one of the most exciting riders around at the moment, in my opinion.
Yeah, and he's got that kind of Edvald Boasson-Hagen unflappability about him, isn't he? He's a bit of a close but quite quiet, but just a beast, really, when he gets going.
I remember one of the things that took my breath away with him the first time, so I was in the team when he first came on as a Neo-Pro, was he has this gift which very few riders do, is on those cobble climbs, the bergs in Flanders, he can ride on them sprinting out the saddle, which is such a specialised skill. Only the true Flandrians can have that ability. The Johan Museeuws, Phil Gilbert could do it. I mean, he was from Wallonie, but he could do it out the saddle. And Tom Boonen can do it, and Dylan van Baarle. And I know that sounds quite silly, because it does sound probably quite easy to go out the saddle on cobblestones, but it's not. It's a bike bounce all over the place, and you need to be so strong. So, yeah, I think we'll see great things from him in the future in those races.
This won't be a popular sight in France. French national road race champion Arthur Vichot going backwards. It's quite heavily built, isn't he, Vichot? It looks like he might struggle sometimes in the higher mountains, and we're certainly in that territory now. De Ghent is still in contact with back of the group of favourites in the polka dot jersey, but really being in that group is of no use to him today, because Dani Navarro and Rafa Majka are tearing into his lead. Rafa Majka's already pulled level in the King of the Mountains competition with Thomas de Ghent.
I can see Team Sky, the pace they're setting is it is a steady state. They're letting it slowly go out, so they brought it back to 4 minutes, and now they've just been slowly letting it out at their own controlled pace at 6 minutes. So they'll be riding a pace that Luke Rowe, Ian Stannard and Vasil Kirienka can maintain for the longest period, hence why that gap is going out a bit. They could at will bring that back with their strong mountain riders, but that would involve dropping 3 of their other riders. So they're basing the pace they're riding on, not on this move that we're looking at here, the group of 30. They don't really care about that at the moment. They're just basing it on what they can control the peloton at and keep their team together for as long as possible. There we have Dylan van Baarle, who's the rider I was just talking about, the Cannondale-Drapac rider. So as you can see there, they're trying to keep the pace up in order to maintain the gap and turn it into, almost guarantee that the winner of today's stage comes out of this group. Which is a big ask still.
Yeah,
because
it's in the balance, that, isn't it? That's not a foregone conclusion at all.
No, not with the climbs that they have ahead of them.
Yeah. It does depend what kind of race is going to develop behind them in the yellow jersey group. But you'd imagine BMC, especially having missed the break today, would be the first team to be on the front foot and try and attack the yellow jersey. Well, you would hope. They haven't even got a rider on the podium as things stand, so they've got to improve the positions of TJ Van Garderen and Richie Porte.
No, if Richie Porte has the climbing legs that he had in Arcala Sanda on Mont Ventoux, then it would be great to see him use them and really launch off, because at the moment they're in a bit of that no man's land, a team of their stature, if you like. They have their best place rider, TJ Van Garderen, is 6th place at 3 minutes 19 seconds, and Richie Porte's in 8th place at 4 minutes 27. And for the size of that team, the budget they have, the riders they've recruited, that's not what the sponsor would be expecting. So, and I personally think Richie Porte is in such a position now where he doesn't really have much to lose. 8th place, 7th, 9th, 6th. He may as well go long, and Serge Pals accelerates here. He's going for the points, so he's not let that competition go yet. He was, he's scoring points all the way through today. He scored 6 points in the first climb, 2 points in the next one. So he's with Navarro and Majka. That's only 3 riders in this group that are interested in the mountain classification.
And Thomas Voeckler.
Apparently. Just annoy them.
So about 300 metres for Serge Pals, who appears to have broken the rest. So he's going to take a huge leap. No, he's not. He's going to get himself 2 points over the top here. That's a Cat 3 climb. Only 2 riders score. The beautifully named Col de Pisselou. The Lou bit of that word means wolf. And I wonder which rider came over in 2nd place. Only 2 riders scoring 2 and 1 respectively. So Serge Pauwels takes himself another couple of points and moves up the rankings a little further. So Dani Navarro, Rafa Majka and Serge Pauwels. That's your selection of polka dot jersey contenders in the group of 30 up the road, who've got 6.5 minutes nearly over the chase.
And off this climb, it's one of the few moments in today's course where they've actually got some flat-ish roads, and it's only about 4 or 5 kilometres, which before they have the sprint at the end of that, the sprint at 71.5 kilometres, and then that goes straight into the next climb, the Col de la Rochette, at 5 kilometres at 5.4%.
Rafa Majka, just confirmation, and we're pretty sure that he passed the line in second place, picked himself up another point, which will nudge him 1 point ahead of Thomas de Gent in the polka dot jersey competition on the road. Still 37 points remain after the third categorised climb of the day. The next one, it's another Cat 3, the Col de la Rochette, and they'll start to climb that at 86.1 kilometres to go. So less than 10k before they're up again. It's just one of those horrible profiles. If they didn't do their sort of long-term reconnaissance on the Tour de France and didn't look week by week at what awaited them, if they're the kind of riders who simply wake up in the morning and look at the stage profile, they would have looked at that in absolute horror.
Yeah, they would have done. This is the sort of stage that you don't really want to do on recon because it's just simply scare you so much. Yeah, it'll probably take you about 7 hours.
Ian Stannard, strapped, bruised, battered, but still on his bike, still in the Tour de France. Belongs to that school of if you started, you better finish. Much like Geraint Thomas, who rode the 2013 Tour de France for Chris Froome with a fractured pelvis. Ian Stannard has mercifully, from his perspective, not broken any bones. Team Sky will be pleased with that too. Well, Pauwels and Majka have decided to go off on one and attack, and again this is maybe a little move to try and splinter up this big 30-man group again and try and whittle it down to a more manageable size.
No, I think so, because as it stands, they're just rolling through the 30, and 6 minutes, they'll be aware it isn't big enough if they want to stand a chance of winning the stage. They need to get that gap further out. At the moment, there's a sort of status quo between the peloton and that group of 30, and I think Majka and Pauwels realise that the peloton, the moment they accelerate, they'll eat into that gap massively, so they need to drag it out now. And in order to do that, they need to get 3 or 4 committed riders, maybe more, or just these 2. I mean, but this will provoke the action from behind, I'd imagine, as seeing, for example, Nibali, or this is where it's good for Pierre Rolland to have 2 riders. They need to chase it down, as we saw. You see one pulling off the front, Tom Slaxer, on the left of the road. He's just been riding, so it's up to them to try and close this down.
1, 2, 3. They've got about a 6 or 7 seconds advantage, so it's something, and it needs to be closed down. They can't just sit and watch, because those 2 strong riders could just get away. Just confirmation of what I was telling you, that is the standings in the polka dot jersey competition, and Majka has on the road a 1 point advantage over Thomas de Gent. Navarro is in 3rd place. Serge Pauwels creeping up all the while though on the rails, so he's a player. Magnificent vista of Mont Blanc, the highest point in the French Alps. Down they go to river level, dropping down into the valley once again before they go up the other side. A couple of interesting riders as well for Lampre Merida, little known internationally, perhaps so much, but one Croatian, Christian Dudasek, he's a good climber, and he's an outside bet for today's stage if his legs are good. Former winner of the Tour of Turkey, where he won the race on the big mountain stages, finishing 2nd and 6th. That's how he did it. Tony Gallopin is gone back to the team car for a bottle, so he's working today. Not entirely sure for whom. Maybe in teams like that they occasionally share out the domestique duties, and today it's his turn.
Yeah, for sure. You just you share the workload.
You do your bit.
If you're thirsty, you go back, you get your bottle, and you collect bottles for your teammates as well. And this is where you do it in that last kilometre before the top of the climb. You drift back into the cars, you collect your bottles, and even if you're off slightly back at the top, you just bridge back on the descent, because you can't take bottles in the descent. Well, you could, but it's so dangerous. And you see Team Sky, they probably had their soigneurs team staff at the side of the road to hand up the musettes and the bottles. So teams will have different strategies they use. Some will go back to the cars, some will have staff at the side of the road to hand up the supplies. And at the top, on a day like this, probably the top of every climb, they'll have team staff out there with bottles and the occasional one with musette, as we've just seen.
Well, the front of the GC group on stage 15 has simultaneously a familiar look to it with Team Sky there, but also an unfamiliar look with Trek Segafredo and Orica Bike Exchange closely marshalling their main men for the podium in Adam Yates and Bauke Mollema. And who would have predicted that at the beginning of the tour? You would have fully expected Astana and Movistar to be the big three teams alongside Sky. But Trek and Bike Exchange, Orica Bike Exchange, are there on merit.
No, it's fascinating to see a British team, American team, and an Australian team there at the front of the race, and it very much shows the way the sport's changed in the recent years.
It's been a while since Trek have been riding in this position on the Tour de France either, looking after a Schleck in previous years, and that's a good few years ago.
There's many riders there from that old team, from the Contador team, and the Schlecks are their best. Obviously, there's Schleck there. There's Jaime Zugadia,
who's up the road.
Who's up the road. Yeah. So they do have Iritza, there's Gregory Rast. These are all riders that are.
Bridge that era,
So this is something they're very accustomed to do, although they haven't done it for a few years. You don't forget how to do it.
And Trek Segafredo in the company of Team Sky, Nairo Quintana and the rest of the peloton. What remains of it, there are little groups off the back already developing. They go over the third climb of the day, with 3 more still to go. Let's not forget there's an intermediate sprint, and that is coming up within the next 2 kilometres. But there's no Peter Sagan in this group up the road, and no sprinters either, so none of them have made the selection. So I wonder what's at stake really at the intermediate sprint. Probably not a great deal. Serge Pals and Rafa Majka have a little advantage over 28 riders trying to chase across to them at this point.
13 seconds as it stands, so it's not much, but it will be enough to instigate moves from that group, I think. And it'll be interesting to see how they're doing. It would be in the interest probably of the teams who are left behind, who have more than one rider, to counter-attack behind rather than just chase it down, because if they counter-attack and cause another split, it would mean their teammate left in that group doesn't have to ride. So in theory, your leader stays in the group, and the secondary rider that you have will try and bridge it across.
As confirmation of exactly what David was just saying, around about 12-13 seconds. That's what Rafa Majka and Serge Pals have over the rest of the breakaway. They're working really well together, these two.
Yeah, and they've chosen quite a good moment to go, because, as I said, this is one of the few moments where the road is quite flat, so they can try and get a gap here, and we know they're 2 of the best climbers in the group, so everyone would have expected them to go on the climb if they were going to go. But now they've gone here, it makes it a little bit difficult to organise a chase, because you can sit on, and people, if they're trying to chase down, they'll get annoyed with people sitting on them, but when it comes to the climb, then it's a whole different ball game. So it was quite an astute move by Pals, and good reactions from Majka to jump on it.
The Movistar pairing of Jon Izagirre and Nelson Oliveira, one of the last 2 riders in that group of 28 that are trying to chase Rafa Majka and Serge Pals up to the sprint point, where I don't think we're going to be seeing a race. Peter Sagan tried to get in the breakaway that would have brought him to this position, so he could get himself another 20 points and cement his almost impregnable position in the green jersey competition. He tried repeatedly to get in the move, but eventually he sat up and allowed the group to go up the road without him. So there's no green jersey, and there's a bit of discussion between Pals and Majka about what to do at this sprint point. 200 metres. I think Pals quite wants the points, and Rafa Majka looks like he's comfortable enough with Serge Pals to take the small financial incentive on the line and the green jersey points that go with it. If there is an understanding and an agreement and a nod here, you don't want Rafa Majka disrupting the harmony. And sure enough, Serge Pals goes through in first place, and Rafa Majka comes through in second. They're pretty hot on their heels, though. They've closed the gap quite effectively.
But it has launched it slightly again. As we can see, the time gap's extended slightly. It's gone up 30-40 seconds since Serge Pals and Majka left.
Well, that's inventive, isn't it? That is the entire digestive and lactating process of a cow laid out in grass format. The cow's being fed at the mouth and being milked at the rear, resulting in cheese. I hope you've all noted that down and have learnt a thing or two.
Science.
6 minutes and 45 seconds, the advantage of the breakaway group. They're not getting away, it's right in the balance still. 87.5 kilometres remaining. The Col de la Rochette is the next climb, and after that it's the Colombier, twice. Welcome back. It's almost 7 minutes that Vincenzo Nibali, Thomas Voeckler, Sebastian Reichenbach, Ilnur Zakarin, Ruben Plaza, Julian Alaphilippe, the list goes on, Pierre Rolland, Jarlinson Pantano, the man in the white jersey for IM Cycling. There's Alaphilippe, that's Bartosz Kozarski. 30 riders have nearly 7 minutes, including Serge Pauwels on the group of, well, it is now 7 minutes on the group of the yellow jersey, and they've got less than 85 kilometres to go. And they're climbing once again. This is the Col de la Rochette. It's a category 3 climb, just over 5 kilometres in length, with an average gradient of 5.4%. Tom Dumoulin still in that group. David, we've barely even mentioned him. We've talked about the options that Cannondale Drapac have. We've talked a lot about Ilnur Zakarin, Vincenzo Nibali, various other candidates, Ruben Plaza for Orica Bike Exchange. What about Dumoulin? On the form he's in, why couldn't he go and win this?
No, I mean, he'd obviously probably be one of the favourites. But it's also interesting to see how relaxed he is. He's sitting there at the back, he's not showing himself, he's riding a very intelligent race, and that comes from the confidence he has as well. He doesn't need to push this, he can ride it in a way that's very much conservative, if you like, and let everyone else force it, like we just saw Serge Pauwels and Rafa Majka, and then he can let the other teams panic and try and bring them back. In the meantime, he just sits there, just watching everything, waiting for when it's time for his move, if he's feeling that good.
Thomas Voeckler is trying to force a selection here, of that there's no doubt. He's the next rider. We did see Serge Pauwels and Rafa Majka, who've been swept up trying to do just this, and now Voeckler is at it, and this is a pretty much typical Voeckler move. I mean, how many breakaways has Voeckler been in his long and glorious career, and how many times has he actually really profited from them? He knows precisely how to handle the tactics in a situation like this.
Yeah, his hit rate is very good, and everybody knows that if Voeckler's in the break, you know he's going to ride a very tactical, clever race, and at times very annoying, but his hit rate is high.
Thomas Voeckler's hit rate is indeed high. So, this is the Col de la Rochette. It's a bit of a pimple in comparison with the next climb after that, the Grand Colombier, which they go over twice on different roads. And Matt Rendell has joined us. And Matt, you can tell us a thing or two, I believe, about the Grand Colombier.
I can tell you a few things about the Grand Colombier. There are 4 roads up it, and there is such a thing, I kid you not, as the Confrérie du Fêlé du Grand Colombier, the Brotherhood of the Nutters, of the Crackpots.
What do you mean? What are you talking about, Matt?
It is...
I'm sure that wasn't a direct French translation. What are you talking about? Explain yourself, man.
There is an organisation that one could join by riding up the 2 hardest sides of the Grand Colombier on the same day. You qualify for membership of the Brotherhood of the Crackpots of the Grand Colombier. And you can become a master if you go up 3 sides in one day, and the Grandmaster must cycle up all 4 sides in a single day, I kid you not. But you have to shell out some cash, don't you? You have to buy a card, a membership card. You have to name your target time, and then you get your card stamped in the post office at one of the 4 villages at the foot of each of these roads up. And again at the top, there are 2 bars at either side of the road at the top. And it's run by a gentleman whose name and address are on the website, for there is a website. I'm not sure what you get for it. The website says, in the event of an accident, the Brotherhood leader's responsibility could not be involved.
Nice. They have a very similar one for Mont Ventoux, the Club des Sanglés. Yeah, where you do all 3 sides and you become a member. My wife's done it very impressively.
I mean, you could just ride up, couldn't you, without buying a card. but then you wouldn't
You need
get
the proof.
You need the proof.
You need
Yeah.
the proof, and you wouldn't get a funny handshake.
Yeah.
But the website says because of the high percentage, it is not advisable to take the descent between Les Granges de Fromentel and Verrières-le-Petit. So we recommend to go towards Lochieu and to turn on the right when you're in the Bordes. And that's what these guys are doing today. So that's the route taken by the Tour riders, but they haven't paid their membership. And anyway, the Lacet, the final one, doesn't go all the way up to the top. So, but they say you can ride or push your bike, both count. But I don't know what happens if you run part of the route.
Without your bike. Very good.
That's it, I'm afraid.
No, that was great stuff. Fascinating as ever. Thank you very much, Matt Rendell. Extraordinary in many ways, that contribution from Matt. Very interesting. The Grand Colombier and then the Lacet du Grand Colombier. And if you're wondering what the difference is and why one is called that and the other's called that, Lacet du Grand Colombier implies, well, it means shoelaces, doesn't it? And if you were watching last year's Tour de France, you will remember the Lacet du Montvernier making their debut in the Alps. And they were spectacular from the helicopter, really, really tight hairpins. I mean, Alpe d'Huez is like a lacet, but I suppose it's just a bit more sweeping with its famous hairpins. To kind of classify as a lacet, you have to be more scrunched down and compact than that, I guess.
Yeah, I suppose so. I mean, we don't actually do so many climbs like that, and they are definitely... They're more fun to ride because they break it up. If I remember correctly, Grand Colombier, there are quite straight sections through the woods, dead steep, and there, which is a bit like Mont Ventoux actually in the lower slopes. And has to be said, when there are the switchbacks, it does make it a lot easier. You can break it up psychologically, and also it flattens out in the corners. You get these little micro rests.
Unless you want to go right into the apex of the curve and choose the steepest section and get it done quickly. I mean, there's two different schools of thought there.
Depends how strong you are, I guess.
What do you mean? So the stronger guys move to the inside?
Well, it's if you're strong enough, because it's a steeper gradient, obviously, so you have to push out more power. But if you go around the outside, it's slightly longer, but you can go faster with less power. So it's all dependent on the actual climb and if you're on your own or in a group or at what point in the race it is.
Sorry, David. They start to climb the super category Grand Colombier at 59.8 kilometres. Once they've got over the top of the Col de la Rochette that they're climbing now and descended. And once they've gone over the top of the Grand Colombier with its 25 points on offer for the King of the Mountains competition, points available for the first 10 riders there, they'll enter the circuit, which is unusual for a Tour de France finish, especially in the mountains, with 38 kilometres remaining. Then they'll pass over the finishing line here in Culoz with 23.5k to go, but 1 kilometre later they'll start to climb the Grand Colombier again, this time over the shoelaces, the Lacet du Grand Colombier. That's an 8.4 kilometre climb at 7.6% gradient. They go over the top of that climb with 14 kilometres remaining, and then it's a descent and a bit of flattening out to the finish line, gap style if you like. And that's why we were talking about Ruben Plaza in particular, because he won that stage into Gap on last year's Tour de France, holding off the chase of Peter Sagan. There is a man who, much like Ruben Plaza, had a big victory on the Tour de France, slightly overshadowed the other day at Chalais-Reynard. On the day Ruben Plaza won, everyone was talking about Peter Sagan, and when Thomas de Gent, the polka dot jersey, won on Chalais-Reynard, everyone was talking about Chris Froome, who rather stole his limelight.
Interestingly, we're not getting these images, but Nelson Oliveira, according to the computer, has attacked to the front of the race. So that's an interesting ride by the Movistar rider to already be attacking on his own. So it's saying he has 36 seconds on this group that we're seeing now.
Well, that says Tête de la Course, which does mean that's the front of the race, and I think that's Ion Izagirre, so there's one Movistar rider there. Where is Nelson Oliveira?
There is Ruben Plaza, the Orica Bike Exchange rider. George Bennett, Flosso Jumbo. Zachary Katusha.
Domenico Pozzovivo is the Italian climber representing AG2 La Mondiale. So we're looking for the blue of Movistar. I wonder if the race has lost track, surely not, of the man who's at the head of the race. Doesn't appear to be there, I must admit. Well, we await confirmation of just where Nelson Oliveira is on the road.
Saying it's all back together again.
Oh, it's all back together. So a blip in the little sticks that hang off the back of the saddles of the bikes. You can see those black units that are GPS trackers, or whatever the technical word for them is. In theory, we know where every bike rider is at any given point in the race. In practice, it's not always the case, 100% accurately.
No.
But it's a developing technology. Yeah. But what we do know is that Thomas Voeckler was keen on breaking this up, and so too was Rafa Majka. And so too was Serge Pauwels. There's some big riders moving to the front of this group now, including Vincenzo Nibali. Both the FDJ riders, Steven Reichenbach included, are close to the front as well. And don't forget, he's the best placed in the general classification at 11 minutes and 41 seconds down at the beginning of the day. So he's moved himself up in into the virtual, what, top 5 of the race, something like that? Hurtling up the virtual GC standings, if the finish line were now, but it isn't. I'm sure the yellow jersey group and the other teams won't allow him to threaten their podium positions.
What's interesting, when they come off this climb, they descend 5 or 6 kilometres and then they go straight into another climb, a 5-kilometre climb, Côte d'Automne, which is not even classified. So it's, it goes to show simply how hard this day is. And it's strange that some of the climbs are classified and some aren't. Serge Pauwels launching, trying to steal some points from Rafa Majka. Majka, you can see how relaxed Majka is. He's just not interested. He was doing this in the other days. He's playing the long game. He's not wasting energy on these little spurts, and even said the guys, look, I'm not going. So he really is looking to try and get points and where it counts, and so far that's worked well for him.
It's a piffling prize, but it does indicate that Serge Pauwels means business in the polka dot jersey competition. And over the top he goes. Serge Pauwels gets himself another 2 points. He picked up 6 points on the first category climb, and he's picked up another 4 on the road.
So yeah, he's scored 11 points so far today, Pauwels.
So the 11 points that he has picked up moves him up to 51. So he's nudged ahead of Rui Costa, who started the day in 5th place in the King of the Mountains competition. Still a sizable gap, though, between him and Rafa Majka, who leads the way. He's the virtual King of the Mountains. Through the Mazières forest they go. And this could only be the Jura Mountains, really. Totally unlike the Pyrenees and unlike the high Alps into which we are about to go. We drive on tomorrow, actually, into Switzerland, changing country for the 2nd time on this edition of the Tour de France, having spent 1 night in Andorra, the Principality of Andorra. We go to another tax haven tomorrow, Switzerland, where tomorrow's stage finishes in Bern. 7 minutes and 6 seconds, 79.5 kilometres to go.
This is working out well. See Mark Cavendish there, with just in front of Tekla Hamanot, his teammate, and so this is working out well for him. He'll be pleased to be here at this point in the race still, because it no doubt means that he'll get to the bottom of the Grand Colombier, the super category at 100 kilometres with the yellow jersey peloton, and normally at that point a gruppetto will be called at some point up there. So it hasn't been the infernal day that perhaps he anticipated, where he'd be chasing with Bernie for 150 kilometres.
Well, Mark Cavendish and indeed all the other sprinters who do eventually form the gruppetto on a mountain stage, their fate is pretty much in the hands of Ian Stannard at the moment. And it depends, their degree of suffering depends on how hard he rides. Don't forget that even though we've just seen the breakaway group go over the top of the Col de la Rochette, there's a 7 minutes gap down to this group of favourites, and even though they're riding at about the same speed, they've still got a fair bit of climbing to do. It's a 5.1 kilometre climb, and there we go. See, that's it. So Mark Cavendish hasn't got to the top of that climb just yet. He's got a couple of teammates, Bernie Eisel, in front of him, but it's not quite a done deal just now. He just needs to get over this climb with not too much of a gap to be able to get back on, because he probably descends faster than, or as fast as, anyone in the professional peloton.
Probably faster than Bernie do.
It's a bit of the race we never see. That's the point, isn't it? How the gruppetto descend. We literally never see that. The motorbike is never on the gruppetto in the descent, or the sprinters in the descent.
No, it's what the gruppetto will normally do, and what Cavendish will be doing now. He's not just being dropped, he'll be holding a power that he knows he can maintain to the summit and maintain over the next climb. So generally what the gruppetto will do, they'll find their pace on the ascent, if you like, and ride that really within themselves at the only speed they can, which will be a lot slower than this group. And then the descents, they will actually go faster in the front of the race. The fastest descents being done in a mountain stage are done at the back of the race by the gruppetto. And then when they get to the valleys, which unfortunately there aren't today, they turn into a massive team time trial, 20, 30 riders rotating through. So they're actually going faster in the front of the race there as well. So it's quite a strange phenomenon. If you were to look at all the splits, the gruppetto is faster downhill, flat, and then slower uphill. And that's, so they're always kind of yo-yoing, coming back, lose time, coming back, lose time.
However good the coverage is, and it is wonderful these days from French television of the Tour de France, there is always like an iceberg, isn't it? You know, we're getting to see 15% of the race essentially, as 85% of the race is lurking there in the unknown. Marcel Kittel, the next of the big sprinters to find it really uncomfortable, and he's beginning to lose contact. He's got no teammates supporting him. Cavendish at least has Bernie Eisel. And you do wonder that we just picked out again a shot of Steve Cummings at the back of this group. Now, if Cummings isn't in the breakaway today and isn't going to take his chance of a stage win, it is quite remarkable that he's not detailed to look after their leader, who is Mark Cavendish. And there is Steve Cummings. I mean, he could have just dropped back and worked with Bernie Eisel to help Mark Cavendish at this point, but he's allowed that freedom not to.
Yeah, and I think that's why he likes his team so much. He gets away with that sort of behaviour, which in any other team I think it would be quite hard for them to justify. But at the same time, you have to understand, often Mark Cavendish and Bernie Eisel, when they're dropping off, they'll order other teammates not to stick with them because they're in control and they don't want to risk having another teammate jettisoned with them. It's easier for them to work as two. They know each other so well.
Right.
And I've seen that before. They basically tell them, they'll say, Steve, no, stay there. And sometimes it's useful then, if Bernie gets tired or they're coming back on or Steve drops off, they've got somebody who's ahead of them to help if they make it back on.
There he is, Steve Cummings, Dimension Data's libero. But it's so successful, particularly this year. Every World Tour stage race that he's entered, he's come away with a stage win, which for Dimension Data, while they await a big GC player in their ranks, that's all they're about, though. That's stage wins. That's their modus operandi. That's what they want to achieve on each race, and Cummings has delivered undeniably every time on the high-profile races this year.
Well, when you consider this is their first year in the World Tour, it's very impressive. I think most World Tour teams would be happy with that sort of stat, and for them to be doing it in their first year in the World Tour is a great achievement.
Ethics Quick Step, dark blue and black, being led up to the top of this climb by the two Martins. Tony just looking over to see where Dan is, and he's right on his wheel.
There will also be sometimes, which we don't see either, is basically gruppetto wars. So if Cav's off and, let's say, Kittel's in a group ahead with the gruppetto, he might have his teammates drive it forward to prevent Cavendish getting back on. For two reasons: to tire him out more, because he'll have to be riding it on his own with Bernie Eisel, rather than in the safety of the group. And then also maybe in the hope, as venomous as this sounds, that they'll finish outside the delay. Whereas if you're in the gruppetto, normally that gives you the sanctuary of numbers, and there are certain rules within professional cycling that if over 40% of the peloton is represented in the gruppetto, they can't be put out of time delay.
Marcel Kittel still has contact with the back of the peloton. Mark Cavendish, we understand, doesn't, but I don't imagine he's too far behind, and he has a bit of descending now to catch them up before they go up the Grand Colombier. It's a super category climb next, and they'll start to climb at just under 60 kilometers from now. We'll get a short breakaway before we see them on the slope to the Grand Colombier. Welcome back. There are 70.7 kilometres to go. The main field is still descending. The lone leader, though, Dylan van Baarle from Cannondale Drapac, who has attacked the breakaway, is starting to climb a little uncategorised climb before they go downhill again, and then they will tackle the super category Grand Colombier. So while the peloton is descending, we're going to try our luck now and see if we can talk to Matt White, who's the Directeur Sportif, of course, from Orica Bike Exchange. They've got a man in the breakaway today. Let's see if we can make contact. It's been difficult in the mountains, but we'll try our luck. Matt, can you hear me? Well, that's the last time we're going to try a phone call today. My apologies if the technology has let us down. We did have him lined up while you were on a break, but he's gone again, I'm afraid. Starting to take this personally. No, interesting move here from Dylan van Baarle. David, he was a rider who we spoke about when we briefly spoke to Charlie Wegelius, his Directeur Sportif, and we kind of predicted or anticipated this move, but I do wonder whether it might be a softening up move for their main man, Pierre Rolland.
Yeah, it's a softening up, and also it allows Pierre Rolland to sit on the wheels in that group now. He won't be expected to contribute to any of the work or chase, and the same goes with Thomas Slagter. So it's it's a good move by Cannondale Drapac, and it's because I think Dylan van Baarle, for starters, won't be able to contribute much once they get Tom Dumoulin's going.
So on him. Wow.
So that's
we were wondering who the first rider might be to emerge from that group of 29 that he left behind, and it's no surprise to see.
And that's
Tom Dumoulin there.
This really does launch. So Tom Dumoulin has been sitting there just waiting, and he'll know Dylan well. They're both Dutch and of a similar age, so that will work out well. Often that's the way. He's somebody you know, you can go up and you can trust and count on to work with you. Because Dylan van Baarle knows that once they hit the super category, he won't be able to help much for Pierre Rolland. So it's better for him now to do something that can contribute to the day.
Well, that animation in the field bears the name of the uncategorised climb they're on, the Côte d'Automne. And that's a powerful two-man move that's got up the road there. Dylan van Baarle, on his own, is a threat. Dylan van Baarle plus Tom Dumoulin is a definite poser and a problem for the breakaway. And someone's going to have to try and get across. Of course, there's a huge reward if you can get across to these two, and then you're part of a very, very elite and powerful three-man group.
No. Yeah, they've known each other for a while. They both race for Rabobank Continental, so that's the sort of move when Tom Dumoulin, he's been sitting there quite quietly. He'll see Dylan van Baarle. He knows how strong Dylan van Baarle is after racing with him when they were younger, and he also knows that if he goes up, he knows Dylan van Baarle, his only mission at the moment is to cause a gap and to stay away, and it is borderline futile because he's not a great climber, but what he is doing is setting up his team leader Pierre Rolland, who's there, we can see at the back, which probably isn't the best place for him to be, considering this will start splintering soon. But so for Tom Dumoulin, that's a stroke of genius for him to go up there, because he can work with Dylan van Baarle without Dylan van Baarle being any threat to him regards the actual stage outcome.
He's in the form of his life, Tom Dumoulin. That attack in Andorra Arcalis was just so emphatic when he decided to go. It was a one-hit wonder, wasn't it? He just went, and that was it. Pretty much the race was over. You saw him go, and you thought that's going to be definitive, and so it proves. And here he goes, right over the top of Dylan van Baarle. It almost looked like, just for a second, as if he was bluffing there. He let on that he was a little bit cooked, and he wasn't. That was a pure bluff, gamesmanship from Tom Dumoulin. He dropped to the back, allowed Van Baarle to go to the front, and just sprang past him.
Well, I think he realised, he got up there, rode with Dylan van Baarle, and realised he wasn't strong enough, and thought rather than have him sit on, even with our old friends, just to get rid of him and go at his own pace and start the time trial, which is what he's doing now. And that's then set we saw Vincenzo Nibali going. So this is going to be red alert, DEFCON 3 if you like, in that move, because they know they can't let Tom Dumoulin go, and as you can see, everybody's moving now, because that's the race proper has begun.
Vincenzo Nibali, one of the big names to react. He's gone up the road, he's reacted to that big move from Tom Dumoulin, and we've got some big hitters now playing the game as we hoped they would on these 6 climbs to the finish line in Culoz on today's stage. Nibali, what danger is he to Tom Dumoulin? Well, if he gets across, he's all sorts of danger and all sorts of problem. He's measuring his Tour de France. Nibali picking his opportunities, sitting in on one day, doing a bit of work for Fabio Aru on another day, and then seizing his opportunity on days like today. And he's up the road and at him. That's Nibali's immediate target. He's going to work to get across to Dylan van Baarle and then maybe jump him and move straight away across to Tom Dumoulin.
And you can see that Pierre Rolland was in such a bad position back there. Moving up now, that's Tom Slachter, his teammate. That's the Cannondale Drapac rider there.
Christian Duracek reacting.
But Pierre Rolland, he was sitting almost at the back of the group with his teammates attacking up the road. When he should have known, you'd have seen Tom Dumoulin go, that's going to cause reactions. And so he's had to move back up through that group and wasting energy doing that when he could be moving off the front.
Jérôme Coppel trying to get on terms. Alberto Losada, the rider from Katusha. So this group is still all together, but Alaphilippe's been a little bit caught out as well. He's sitting on the wheel of Pierre Rolland, way out of contention at the back there. And Nibali's just gone straight past Dylan van Baarle, so it's a very, very elite selection up front. Can you even see Tom Dumoulin?
There he is.
Yeah, he's got a 150 metres gap, maybe not quite that much, and Nibali is in full flight.
This is the perfect scenario for Tom Dumoulin. He'll have wanted, when he attacked, to draw out the strongest and best riders from that move. And he's done it at a moment in the race which perhaps wouldn't have, unless you did the recon or had a car ahead telling you and you studied the profile, because his climb isn't classified, you perhaps would have switched off from it. But this is the equivalent to a Cat 3 at least. So it has been a good move, because it means he's got the gap before the super category Grand Colombier, which starts in about 12, less than 10 Ks now, and it means he can get to the bottom and just set his own time trial pace. Ortones is a village, and we can see doing their tribute as well to the tragedy in Nice.
Just in sensational form, Dumoulin. A rider really people weren't talking about particularly before the Tour de France, and he just wasn't the name on everyone's lips. He had a brilliant Giro d'Italia, or at least the first phase of it, but he's just blown the Tour de France apart in terms of panache, and that fantastic individual time trial the other day, just proving that he is now the preeminent time trialist, and then very modestly being forced to admit that he was the nailed-on favourite for the Olympic gold medal at the end. He said, even I have to confess now, yeah, I'm probably the favourite. I mean, if he continues in this form, no one can touch him, surely, in the Olympic Games.
No, there's no, and we haven't seen in a long time what you could almost classify Tom Dumoulin. He was known as a time trial specialist, a pure time trialist in many ways, and yet he's climbing now with the best. We saw him last year at the Vuelta. It was the first time we saw it really in the high mountains. We've seen it here. He won in Arcalis in Andorra, and now he's launching another mountain stage, what we consider to be one of the most challenging stages of this whole Tour de France, and once again he's off the front forcing it. So it's he's proving to be something quite special.
So here's a little thing as well, David. If Dumoulin makes it over this uncategorised climb, makes it over the Grand Colombier, and makes it over the Lacet du Grand Colombier, he's the king of the mountains at the end of the day. And well, depending on what points Rafa Majka picks up, of course, but that's a possibility as well. So it's another little sideshow in the continuing Dumoulin story, another jersey that he might potentially pull on, starting the day in a 4th place on 58 points.
No, and it goes to show how quickly it can change. If you have one of those big mountain days that go well for you, you can take yourself from being far out of contention into being the favourite for one of these jerseys, and Tom Dumoulin's proving that.
Vincenzo Nibali has been joined by, I think it's Jérôme Coppel and Domenico Pozzovivo. Pozzovivo and Nibali, both veterans of this year's Giro d'Italia, with differing fortune. It was thoroughly underwhelming for Domenico Pozzovivo. He underperformed really by his own standards on the Giro, which is normally his strongest race in the season. But Vincenzo Nibali overperformed. Sure, he took advantage of the fact that the race leader, Steven Kruijswijk, crashed in unfortunate circumstances on the descent into France in Risoul, and but, well, you can't really quibble with how Vincenzo Nibali kicked the door open once it was allowed just a chink of light to open up. He just battered down his opportunity and seized another Grand Tour win, his 4th in his glittering career.
I think that was Pantano for IAM, who's leading down descent. So these are such strong riders. We can see if they're going into the bottom of the Grand Colombier with over 7 minutes in the peloton, it'll be hard push for the peloton to bring that back, because we know. We've seen how strong Tom Dumoulin's climbing. We know what Vincenzo Nibali's capable of. So that's a very strong move, and I think Tom Dumoulin's move has forced the strongest from that group of 30 to start attacking themselves. And play their cards now rather than wait for the obvious, which would have been to go on the super category Grand Colombier.
Flatter roads for Dumoulin, so he gets down into his classic time trialling position, just tightening his straps, adjusting them, and that is the chase group being headed still by Vincenzo Nibali.
And they've got a fairly decent gap. And when you've got Vincenzo Nibali descending, he is recognised as being one of the best descenders in the world, so that's going to be tricky for the remainders of that group of 30 to bring this back. You see now Cannondale, Drapac are having to ride, and they're having to chase this down, because otherwise they're watching the stage disappear.
So Jalinson Pantano from IM Cycling. Domenico Pozzovivo, probably the least suited to doing this chase. He'll do very little work, if any. I should imagine he'll just sit on and recover, because that was a big effort for Pozzovivo to get onto these two.
They have to shut this down as quickly as possible to Tom Dumoulin, because they know that he is a pure time trialist at his origins. If he's got the gap, they know he knows how to pace it and control it. So it's, but at the same time, he can't. Normally, if you knew Nibali was coming, you would sit up a bit and wait, because he'd be a great asset to have in that move. But at the moment, the chasing group is still too far behind.
Nonetheless, it's a bit of a poser. That's why Tom Dumoulin keeps looking around to make eye contact, and try and figure out what the sage thing to do here is. I mean, 63.5 kilometres and 2 enormous climbs still to come. That is a ridiculous prospect, really, all on your own. So I wonder if he's best just to wait and allow this group to get across to him. And he certainly got it in his locker to go again, Tom Dumoulin, and break this lot if he's of a mind to and finds his opportunity.
But again, it's not good if you're as strong as Tom Dumoulin is and in the form that he is. There's no reason why he can't do those 2 mountains on his own, because there isn't so much flat, and that's normally where the big disadvantage comes when you're racing against a chasing group. The chasing group isn't getting much advantage from riding through at the moment. It's every man for himself. So he's better being ahead on his own, setting his rhythm and riding as if he's now got a 62.8 kilometre time trial ahead of him. But he keeps checking, because also we don't know, because sometimes the radios, the radio that he has in his ear from his team car, he'll have a team car behind that group of the remnants of what's 26 riders now, but it might be out of range, so he won't know exactly who it is that's coming up to him, the composition of that group. So hence why he keeps looking around, checking.
And they are coming across.
So now he seems to have just laid off a little bit, making the judgment call that it's probably best to have those 3 join him.
Yeah, the body language suggests, although he's just got to negotiate a few corners here, which he does. They might be coming across.
Yeah, no, he's definitely waiting for them now, I think.
So there's Nibali,
and
Pantano and Domenico Pozzovivo. And pretty soon they're going to join Tom Dumoulin. There'll be 4 at the front of the race, and they'll have an 8 minutes and 16 seconds advantage.
And he's drawn out some of the best riders from that group, which is part of the reason you launched that initial early attack, which he's done, which is to bring out those strong riders that you can rely upon to work with you and be effective. And you couldn't ask for better than Vincenzo Nibali.
Or more dangerous.
Or more dangerous at the same time, yeah.
What would Vincenzo Nibali give for a stage victory on the Tour de France, just to remind the world of who he is?
And interestingly, we see here as well, we've talked about it before, Vincenzo Nibali being one of the favourites for the Olympic road race. And we've seen him doing his sort of day on, day off, if you like, in many ways. He's not at his best, but we're seeing glimmers of it. And as the race goes forward, I think we're getting more and more of that. But then there's also Tom Dumoulin, who's the same. He's not racing the GC, but we know he's targeting the Olympic time trial. So we might actually be seeing here 2 of the riders who we'll see at the front at the Olympics. Most certainly Tom Dumoulin in the time trial, but perhaps Tom Dumoulin and Vincenzo Nibali at the front in the road race.
Wearing different kits, of course, when the Olympic Games come around. Tom Dumoulin will be riding for the Netherlands, and Vincenzo Nibali will be in that iconic dark blue kit for the Italian team. And that's a very select group. Pantano, Pozzovivo, Nibali and Dumoulin. Do they have the stage win amongst them? We'll find out pretty soon as we go up the Colombier for the first time. Welcome back. The calm before the storm of the Grand Colombier. on the flat roads, and pretty soon they'll be heading out, kicking up left and starting to climb. Dylan van Baarle is struggling for Cannondale Drapac. He was the first, really, to launch a successful-ish attack, or at least get a gap on the breakaway group, but he's also the first to pop off the back. He looks cooked, Dylan van Baarle. I think it's the end of the road for him. Christian Duracek as well, just beginning to struggle and lose contact from Lampe Merida. And there's a big chase on because, so it's Jan Polanc. Christian Duracek is still there.
Jerome Coppel being dropped. So you can see that the pace has been lifted so much in these big groups. They have to, because they're now, if they don't shut this down now, that group of Nibali, Dumoulin, Pantano and Pozzovivo, they're never going to see it again. So that increased pace, we can see now it's 8 minutes 33 to the yellow jersey group, so it's gone up, jumped up a minute and a half or so.
Alberto Losada also struggling, which is an indication he's a very experienced and talented mountain domestique, normally for Joaquim Rodriguez. But he's struggling. That's the group of 4 riders up the road. They've still got an advantage. There's a huge chase going on, and Dumoulin has gone to the front of that Nibali-Pantano group. Pozzovivo's been distanced a little bit. He looks like he's the first to drop off. But Dumoulin and Nibali and Pantano, to be fair to him too, what an elite trio that is. And they still look relatively comfortable and have a small lead to defend.
Yeah, and it looked like it was Dumoulin who accelerated a little bit just and forced... and Pozzovivo was dropped in that move, and Pantano, we can see who is on scintillating form at the moment after finishing 4th in Tour of Switzerland overall and winning the very hard final stage. These are three very strong riders, and the fact that Pozzovivo is being distanced, who's an absolute pure climber, as you can see by his size, it goes to show the speed they're pushing it at.
Pierre Roland's got himself a little bit better placed. He's towards the front of that group, so too is Rafa Majka. There's a lot of hard work and endeavour being used up to bring them all back. That group containing Dumoulin and Nibali. Meanwhile, further down the road, 8.5 minutes down the road, this is the scene, and still Ian Stannard does his job, and still Luke Rowe is there. And surely their job is just to deliver the climbers team, so to speak, within Team Sky, to the foot of the Grand Colombier. Thabo Gramay, rather surprisingly, also loses contact with the breakaway. Riders continue to get shelled out of the back of that 30-man group originally, but by the time they get to the top of the Colombier, 10.2 kilometres from here, that's not going to be the case. It's going to be strewn all over the road. Ilno Zakarin from Katusha, he's still a very strong rider and still a deep threat to all of the rest of them. Ruben Plaza, the winner into Gap last year for Orica Bike Exchange these days, having signed from Lampre. He's struggling a little bit. And there's an attack from Dani Navarro, so he's gone. Tom Dumoulin looks round to Ilno Zakarin, wondering whether he'll respond. But Dani Navarro has struck out with 10 kilometres of the Grand Colombier to go. He came right from the back of that group, through the middle, and accelerated past them, and he has a gap, and there's no immediate response. Nibali has got on the front, and he's taken responsibility to bring the rest across. Navarro is the first of those to attack on the Colombier.
Zubeldia, Jaime Zubeldia, it's been distanced as well, so it's becoming as much a race from the back as it is the front, as the riders are all dropped as the pace increases. So there's only a handful of riders from that group now who are actually racing each other at the front, and one guy who's conspicuous in his absence from those moves is Majka, who's just sitting there as usual, playing very cool, probably waiting until everyone's used their attacks before he makes his move.
Tell you what, this is an important ride as well for the rider from FDJ who's survived the cut, as Dani Navarro goes again, and actually it's the rider from FDJ, and that is Sebastian Reichenbach, who's one of the 2 to respond, including Rafa Majka, and Majka is right on to Navarro again. Tremendous panache, actually, from Dani Navarro to be on the attack once again today. I've lost track of how many times we've seen him up the road in the Tour de France and attacking.
He has ridden a very aggressive race. And
hasn't he just?
Probably partly due to the fact that the team leader, Nasser Bouhanni, was pulled at the last minute because of his injured hand. And so that team really has, and he goes again, so that really has opened up opportunities to riders in that team who wouldn't have had them otherwise.
He's determined to make this work, but I don't think he's going to. Majka looks very good today, very strong and tactically very clever. Sebastian Reichenbach is there, and just to complete my thought about him, don't forget that Reichenbach, as George Bennett now goes out to the back, started the day 11 minutes and 41 seconds down in the general classification, and look at the advantage he has over the yellow jersey group now, so he could be moving up the GC by the end of the day, substantially.
He does look very strong. He was the the rider that we finally brought back that group of four. If like I caught a glimpse of him dragging everyone up to Dumoulin, Nibali, Pozzovivo, and Pantano. And but Majka really does seem the strongest, if you like, and the most tactically astute. He just lets everyone fire all their bullets, use them up, and then he moves once he sees that everyone's on their hands and knees. It'd be interesting if he sees that seems to be his MO normally.
Haven't seen the yellow jersey for a while, but there he was. And further up the road, well, signs of weakness now from Vincenzo Nibali. He's dropped further back. He's with Pierre Rolland for company, and Julien Alaphilippe has recovered. He's one of the riders who's moved up the road and put the Italian into trouble, so that's something of a surprise to see him going backwards. Bartosz Szarski, another one of the riders, and Jon Izagirre.
So this is the front group now: Zakharin, Pantano, Majka, and no, it's not possibly, but it's Voyeurs?
Yeah, Villermoz.
Villermoz.
And there's Reichenbach. He's able to talk, for heaven's sake, so fair play to him. Yeah, he's a rider we haven't been speaking a great deal about, but he's assumed GC leadership in a team shorn of their GC man, Thibaut Pinot, who abandoned before the time trial a few days ago.
It's the yellow jersey group now splintering off the back, so the gruppetto will start to form there as the sprinters really. Well, once they're distanced at the bottom of this one, it's unlikely they'll make it back on again, and they'll be aware of that. Whereas up to now, each time they've been dropped, they've fought to get back on. They won't necessarily fight to get back on now with 55 kilometres. Well, for them it would be 57, 58 kilometres to go to the finish. Pantano is the only rider that survived from that group of four that had previously attacked. So that's Pozzovivo. You can just see ahead in front of Serge Pals in the distance. So it's that's Pantano definitely seems to be one of the strongest climbers there. He's managed to recover from that breakaway that we see Vincenzo Nibali and Tom Dumoulin there. They haven't quite recovered from that and now are paying for that big effort before the Grand Colombier.
So the big 70-kilometre solo for Tom Dumoulin isn't going to happen today. Christian Dudashek for Lampre Merida, the Croatian climber, he's on the wheel of the Pole, Rafa Majka. Sebastian Reichenbach for FDJ and Switzerland, 27 years of age. Joining from FDJ from IM Cycling, where he was their GC hope for a couple of years, including one year where he finished third on a stage into the Giro. But other than that, his results have been reasonably modest to this point.
Now we can see Vincenzo Nibali really has thrown in the towel. It's all of a sudden George Bennett, who was suffering for... Nibali really is, I think, now cut his losses. He realises that today isn't going to be the day, so there's not much more into him destroying himself. He's in a position where he can just find his rhythm, sit on all the other riders and have them take him to the finish and fight another day.
And Luke Rowe leads the way for Team Sky. Ian Stannard is no longer on duty at the front of the Team Sky train. Shane Archbold, the famous mullet from Bora Argonne, always at the back of the peloton. So too is Steve Cummings. There's Mark Cavendish, so he's safe. Marcel Kittel too. Andre Greipel, that's where the sprinters are, towards the back, and now they will finally get together and form a gruppetto, because this is the big, well, not the last climb, but it's the first of the two big climbs that will define this stage and really ignite the GC race. Might not happen on this ascent of the Colombier, but it will surely happen on the Lacet du Grand Colombier that come with 14 kilometres still remaining when they go over the top of that.
Yeah, you can see all the riders are just continuing ahead of Nibali now. So I think Tom Dumoulin's even behind or with Nibali. So yeah, they've certainly cut their losses.
Well, it looked like a really powerful move, and Jarlinson Pantano was part of that move. But surprisingly, perhaps, Vincenzo Nibali and Tom Dumoulin are the two riders who are suffering the most from that impressive-looking four-man breakaway that was caught, thanks in no small measure to the efforts of Sebastian Reichenbach from FDJ. Jon Izagirre, now he might well sit up and look for Nairo Quintana and Alejandro Valverde. Just ride within himself now until the GC race bridges across. 8 minutes and 30 seconds. The same should be the case for Vincenzo Nibali, but he looks cooked, and I'm not entirely sure he's on domestic duty today, or indeed at all in the Tour de France. We have seen him working a bit for Fabio Aru, but not consistently.
And we did it at Arcalis, we saw him bring him in. But no, I mean, I think here for riders like Izagirre, you drink and you eat and you rest up and you try and recover as much as you can, so you can serve a purpose when your team leaders come racing up from behind. because you never know that we might see an attack launched or something, in which case it will be your dream scenario as being that leader who attacks is to have your teammates strewn up the road ahead, so each time you jump up to them they can help you.
The polka dot jersey of Thomas de Gendt leading this group of strugglers who've just begun to lose contact with the group of favourites. Michael Alpecini being one of them from Orica Bike Exchange, the Swiss rider. Swiss rider at the back of the race at the moment and a Swiss rider at the front of the race, Sebastian Reichenbach. And tomorrow, of course, we head into Switzerland, so that is working out quite well for the FDJ man, who's looking extremely fresh today. That group of riders who've broken the breakaway to pieces at the moment have a 26-second advantage over what French television is calling, for good reasons, the Groupe Roland. And Alexis Villamoz, another Frenchman, well, he's attacked, so they go again. And the harmony amongst this group of survivors from the original 30-man move has been aborted, frankly. They're all attacking each other, and the pace is continually being raised. That's Reichenbach on the front now. Villamoz from AG2R La Mondiale, stepping on his pedals. Rafa Majka looking ominously strong in the yellow of Tinkoff. Ilno Zakarin from Katusha. Serge Pauwels. Julien Alaphilippe from Ethics Quickstep, grimacing a little, but he's made that cut, and he is part of that group that's gone up the road.
Yeah, he's doing a great ride, Alaphilippe. This is all new for him, and doing so well on the big mountain stage it's going to be massive for his confidence.
That's the Grand Colombier. It's so good, they're going to ride it twice. Still to come on today's stage. Welcome back. We're on the black slopes of the Grand Colombier, where the road kicks up to 13% with 4.5 kilometres remaining, and it's not just for a few hundred metres either. Sustained steep climbing, and that is the launch pad for Ilno Zakarin to break a little hole in this group again, and he's dragged Rafa Majka with him. So once again, Zakarin and Majka are proving to be amongst the strongest. There's a reaction coming though from Alexis Villamoz, Serge Pauwels, who of course last time we had a big mountain stage on Ventoux, finished in second place for Dimension Data. He's there too in contention, and so too is Sebastian Reichenbach, who's having a really interesting day. 8 minutes and 33 seconds the advantage this group has over the yellow jersey group. Should that go out to 8:57, then the virtual position for Sebastian Reichenbach means that he's on the podium, threatening the position of Adam Yates. Now, there's an awful lot of racing between now and then, but that is a critical moment potentially for the race to think, well, actually, that's enough, that we really have to bring these guys back because our podium place is under threat now.
And that's where other teams come into play. That's where you see Orica Bike Exchange going to help Team Sky in the front of the peloton. And that's what we were talking about earlier, how in the third week all different factors come into play. It's no longer just one team controlling it. Other teams are chasing their own objectives or defending their positions. And podium at the Tour de France is a position that is defended. We will see that happen, I'm sure, at some point or another in this last week.
But Ilno Zakarin and Rafa Majka have a definite advantage over this chase group. What is it, about 10 seconds, thereabouts, and probably going out the way they're riding. Yeah. Two of the strongest.
Well, these are the two riders that started right at the beginning of the day. That group of 30 was formed in the chase to hunt these two down when they went away on the first climb of the day. So it goes to show that they have been the strongest all day so far.
What's the conversation here?
Going points, I think.
Yeah.
Making sure that he's
not
still 4Ks to go.
Points. Yeah.
And probably just saying, let's just work together. Let's keep this rolling.
These are the time gaps, as you can see how many groups there are, and that's not half the story, I suspect. Behind the peloton there will be further groups developing. So 13 seconds between Majka and Ilno Zakarin to the group just chasing of about half a dozen riders. Then there's another 30 seconds or thereabouts back to the Groupe Roland. I think he's with just two other riders at this point, Pierre Rolland. And Vincenzo Nibali, in the company of Tom Dumoulin et al., they've sat up, essentially. Their day is over, and a lot of those riders, including Nibali and Jon Izagirre, will be looking over their shoulders to see Fabio Aru and Nairo Quintana, their team leaders, coming up the road towards them, and they might well be working for them. And they are no longer in this race. This one's gone.
This is a dangerous move for that group of 9 that's in pursuit of them now. We saw before Reichenbach seemed to be one of the strongest about that. That was what closed down primarily the initial move by Nibali, Dumoulin, Pozzo Vivo and Pantano. But now it's Maika was all sitting there waiting, and it was Zakharin that then attacked. And Maika realised the danger of that and has jumped on it immediately, didn't hesitate. Whereas we've seen him hesitate and really be quite calculated, and this was part of that calculation. He realised that Zakharin was a rider that he could work with, that had the potential to take him all the way.
Étoile Mondial have 2 riders there, Domenico Pozzovivo and Alexis Villamoz. Villamoz it is who's doing the work at the front, with Pozzovivo just sitting on the back at the moment. He was on the attack in that group with Nibali, Dumoulin and Jarlinson Pantano. Pantano's still in that chase group, and so too is Julian Alaphilippe. But these two have a decent advantage, and it's going out. I think probably of all the non-GC climbers, these two are the strongest in the Tour de France, you would argue. Ilnur Zakarin and Rafa Majka on another day are proper Grand Tour contenders.
Yeah, they are, and it's so that's often what happens in Grand Tours, is the GT riders that aren't actually competing in the GC for one reason or another. Maybe it was a bad day at the beginning, or they weren't quite in top form.
They both rode the Giro.
They both rode the Giros. That's another reason as well. But you'll often see them when it gets to the really hard stages. They're the racers that are up the road dominating it, because they do have that pedigree and those capabilities. We've seen Nibali, Dumoulin. We both know. We saw Dumoulin finish up there in GC of the Vuelta. We know how good Nibali is in Grand Tours, but because they're not wasting the GC, they just go and have fun on these very hard days, and we get to see just why they are normally considered to be the best GC riders.
Which means that everybody else is going to be put to the sword today, including Dani Navarro, who's on the attack once again, the Cofidis man, the Spaniard who finished in 3rd place at Chalet Renard, having battled so hard to get across the gap to a duo of riders, much like Ilnur Zakarin and Rafa Majka. He bridged across to Thomas de Gent and Serge Pals, only to find that they accelerated again and dropped him, and it was all for naught. But he's a brave rider, Navarro, and he's at it again.
31 seconds this group, now 42 seconds, so it keeps going up now. So you can see this group is not really finding its rhythm. They're not really working together very well, and I think there's a sort of a mixed bag of sensations going on. I think some of them feel okay, others are just hanging on for dear life, which is really not allowing the group to find any harmony.
Very distinctive, the Grand Colombier. Very, very heavily wooded, no exposed sections that you see on mountain climbs in the Alps, and the higher Alps like the Galibier.
This is the yellow jersey. Look how small that's gone already, the yellow jersey group. So that's quite surprising. With no attacking, with just simply Sky setting tempo, they've reduced it to about 25-30 riders.
Ominous. That's ominous for everybody else. 5 kilometers to go for the main peloton, such as it is. The yellow jersey group, the group of favourites. Vasil Kirienka on the front. Sergio Henao, Geraint Thomas, Mikel Nieve, Mikel Landa. Wout Poels in the yellow jersey of Chris Froome.
And they haven't even had to use any of their mountain domestiques yet, with Kirienka still there. It's normally it's him, Ian Stannard, Luke Rowe, who do all the graft work on the flat windy days, and then they hand over to the other domestiques for the days like this. But today we've seen Ian Stannard and Luke Rowe control the race right to the bottom of the Grand Colombier, and then they've handed over to Kirienka, who's now doing his last bit. So that's an amazing achievement for Team Sky, because the race hasn't even really kicked off, if you like, for the GC races, and they still haven't used up any of their key mountain domestiques.
Well, this group are going to have their work cut out if they're going to get across to Ilnur Zakarin and Rafa Majka. Bartosz Hazarski is still holding on to the coattails of that group of 9 riders, trying to chase the 2 who have split everything apart. Rafa Majka's immediate objective will be the 25 points that he can take to cement his King of the Mountains jersey on the day at the Grand Colombier. That's all he needs, and he will be on the podium. So Astana moving to the front on the Grand Colombier, and Team Sky still have most of their men in line looking after the yellow jersey. got about 4 kilometres to the top of the Grand Colombier, has the main peloton, but Ilnur Zakarin and Rafa Majka are closing in on a win, effectively, for Rafa Majka in the King of the Mountains competition on the day. He will be allowed, I'm almost certain of that, to take maximum points by the Russian, Ilnur Zakarin, who has been working very effectively, that duo, and doing a lot of damage to all the riders further down the road. This is Sylvain Chavanel just dropping off the group of favourites and going back and collecting water. Then sitting up for the day, that's the neutral service car, not his team car. Meanwhile, Astana are showing a lot of intent, and Jakob Fuglsang and Diego Rosa have gone to the front.
That's interesting. You see, already that thins out the group immediately. We saw Dan Martin swinging out to the right, finding his position. But what was a group spread across the road has all of a sudden become strung out. So that means that the Astana are actually taking the race by the scruff of the neck. So that's good to see, because otherwise Sky were simply, it was just proving too easy for them to control without anybody actually challenging them.
Magnificent view of Mont Blanc. It's proving a little bit too much now for Nelson Oliveira from Movistar and for Bartosz Szarski from Bora Argon. Even the brave, indefatigable Dani Navarro, who's attacking once again today, the climber for Cofidis, is dropping off. And one by one, just trying to reel in Zakarin and Majka, is costing this group numbers. Julian Alaphilippe, the next man in the colours of Ethics Quickstep, just bouncing around in his saddle, trying to maintain contact with that group.
They have a minute now, so that's very impressive. Zakarin and Majka, because they've just been steadily taking that out. And I think I even caught a glimpse before of the Majka's got his team car up there now, which again just indicates how much they've stretched that out.
Ilnur Zakarin and Rafa Majka have just 1 kilometre to get over the top of the Grand Colombier. Rafa Majka will be thinking about the 25 King of the Mountains points that would give him the King of the Mountains jersey on the podium today. This group of chasers has already a minute to make up on those two, and it looks like a pretty forlorn prospect. Meanwhile, further down the road, the first sign of action really in the group of favourites, and it's coming in the form of Astana. They've sent 2 of their best to the front. Jakob Fuglsang beginning to grimace in second wheel. The yellow jersey of Chris Froome has still got plenty of men around him, but this is clearly the intention of Astana, and you'd have thought other teams as well, if they want to join in the fun, in inverted commas, they really need to try and soften up Team Sky today and force Chris Froome to lose his domestiques and expose him a little bit. Maybe not on this climb, but the whittling process can begin now for it all to explode, possibly on the next descent of the Grand Colombier up the Lacé.
Well, it certainly indicates that Aru intends to attack, otherwise there'd be no reason in him doing that. He's lying in 10th overall at the moment, at 5 minutes 16 seconds, so it's in his interest to try and get back some time, and he's also in a position at 5 minutes where Team Sky aren't going to be that bothered. They'll let him go with that initial jump. Although Chris Froome's so strong, he might just go with it anyway. This close to the finish, he can do that. But we saw Wout Poels there look much like he did on Von 2. He has that gaping mouth. He looked like he's going to blow up at any moment, but actually he ends up being one of the last guys there. So he's still got Wout Poels and Serge Enau and Geraint Thomas, so there's no reason for Chris Froome to move, and I imagine if Aru was to go, he would maybe prefer to keep his domestiques next to him rather than go after himself.
Well, sadly for Warren Barguil, that has been a repeated scene. He is one of the first of the favourites, if you like, the team leaders to drop when it goes hard at the front of the yellow jersey group, and you can see the size of that group. Well, how big is that really?
Looks like 15, 20 riders.
That looked like a really extreme selection had been made, almost invisibly, by that Astana acceleration. I'm not sure we saw quite the damage that was being done. We know Warren Barguil has dropped off the back, but who else has suffered from as a result of that acceleration? Next time we get back to them, it'll be revealing as Julian Alaphilippe bridges across. He's going on the attack, trying to get across. But Dan Martin is clearly there. Fabio Aru is there, otherwise they wouldn't be riding. He's in about 5th wheel, and further up the road, 8 minutes up the road, in fact, Julian Alaphilippe is bringing with him Alexis Villamoz, and Sebastian Reichenbach from FDJ is trying to react. And there's a little battle over the top of the Grand Colombier. Good ride from Alaphilippe. Thought he was cooked earlier, but he's responded really well. And Alexis Villamoz has looked the strongest of the AG2R Le Mondial duo in this group as well.
Yeah, it's in pieces now, and that's what a 13-kilometre climb will do. But they feel quite comfortable most of the way. You can sit there, find your rhythm, but then at the top, if somebody makes an acceleration like Alaphilippe is doing, then it nukes the group completely.
That's a tiny gear, very high cadence. Alaphilippe is flying, though, and he is the best of that chase group, clearly, at this point in the climb. Those are the men he's trying to track down. Big move from Alaphilippe. It's absolutely holding nothing back at this point, so just hope for his sake he doesn't go, the lights don't go out here.
Well, he can afford to
a massive effort.
He can afford to do it. He's timed it to perfection. We'll see the summit's just coming up, so he can put himself in the red. And look how quickly he's coming up on that. So he's made the decision to, and he's much like Dan Martin. He can do an effort that lasts 2-3 minutes, explosive, and he's timed it so he'll probably be exploding at the top, at the summit, but he'll have eaten so much into that gap, and then he can recover on the long descent and hopefully use descending skills to come back onto these two guys.
Yeah, bravo, Julian Alaphilippe. That is an impressive acceleration. Can he hold it for long enough to get across to these two? He's right in the convoy of cars. Don't forget that gap had gone out to a minute, so the cars were allowed in. As over the top they go, for the first time they take the Grand Colombier, and Rafa Majka takes 25 points and the lead in the King of the Mountains competition at the end of the day. Ilno Zakarin, in his company, takes on sustenance and a feed bag, and this man is roaring across the gap to them. Where's that finishing arch? He's got it in his sights now. He's just got 32 seconds to make up. Might be tricky. They've gone over the top and they are already on the descent, these two. Alaphilippe has blown apart the chase and he will solo across in third place, and at this point there are 47 kilometres of racing remaining for Julian Alaphilippe, and he's in third place on the road. Good move from him, but now what happens? He's all on his own.
But that was brilliant. He's closed 30 seconds on his own in the space of 600-700 metres. So that was good, because I think that Zakarin and Majka, they were quite complacent. They've taken a minute out, and then Adam Yates sitting in the back of the group, where we've grown quite accustomed to seeing him sit there and just monitor things and not panic and keep his own pace. So hopefully that's the same as it has been in the past, and that isn't a sign of him struggling. But from what we've seen in the last few mountain stages, that's simply the position he rides in.
Joaquim Rodriguez. You saw Jakob Fuglsang, the camera's just past him. There is Richie Porte and TJ Vergaderen side by side, and on the wheel of the yellow jersey, Nairo Quintana in front of him, Fabio Aru, Bauke Mollema in front of Fabio Aru, and Team Sky Domestiques, well, how many do they have? They've still got 4 men there. Nieve, Landa, Sergio Henao and Pauls. The entire climbing team is still there. Otherwise, the leaders are pretty much isolated. Roman Kreuziger is there, Alejandro Valverde is there, but there are very few domestiques left. And now Jarlinson Pantano, from almost nowhere, has got across to Julian Alaphilippe, which is probably good news for Alaphilippe, because these two can work together at least to get across to Zakarin and Majka, who you can just about make out in the distance.
Yeah, that's much better, because although it's a descent, you still are going to go faster if there's 2 of you. You get a rest, because you're having to pedal. You can see this often, depending on the descent, and one like this, you're not far off your threshold, even going down it in this sharp end of the race. And they've suddenly realised now, I think, like I said, we saw the last K, they were quite complacent at a minute's gap, and all of a sudden they're now aware that Alaphilippe and Pantano are coming across, so they're back, heads down, hammering it.
Yeah, it's good news for Alaphilippe. Perversely, it's one of the strange things about cycling. You get caught, and sometimes that's the best thing that can happen to you. Here's one of the first men from that original group of 30 riders who broke away and got clear to get swept up. Dylan Van Baarle, who is attacking, and there the lights really did go out on Van Baarle, and he's dropped back frighteningly quickly, and he'll be swept up and spat out by the group of favourites straight away.
I think I saw Sergio now dropping back down the line, which would be a little bit of a surprise. Unless actually might be going back to get bottles, perhaps. No, there's no team cars there, so it's not that. Yeah, there he is.
Yeah, looks like he might have been dropped, Sergio now. If he can just dig in and limit his losses, he might be able to get back on the descent and then be of use, if he can, on the next climb and the final climb of the day. Not too far to go as Van Baarle just pops out the back of that group of climbers, understandably. Not too much climbing left here.
This is always the the advantage of having 3 or 4 super domestiques like that, because if you have one in difficulty like today, Sergio now, there's Mikel Nieve, he's on a great day. The other days it's been Mikel Nieve that's been dropped out first out of the climbing domestiques they have, and today it's Sergio now, but they've still got 3 left, so strength in numbers if ever there was.
Going back to my original point about domestiques, though, I think every other leader apart from Chris Froome is exposed. Fabio Aru has one man. I think it's Diego Rosa still there for him. Other than that, no, it's out on your own. Everyone is on their own. Unless you count Alejandro Valverde as a kind of super domestique for Nairo Quintana.
Yeah, but we saw before Jakob Fuglsang was the Astana teammate who had been sitting on Diego Rosa's wheel, and even he couldn't hold his teammate's pace. He's since been dropped. So this Jerome Coppel of I Am Cycling about to be called. He had been in that big group of 30.
Adam Yates in the white jersey, still very much a part of that group of favourites, and still, as you were talking about, David, in his favoured position, it seems, slightly counterintuitively, of sitting on the back, which strikes us all as a pretty dangerous place to be, but he seems to master it.
So they're about to make the junction, Pantano and Alaphilippe, so that's going to be a good, strong 4 riders, which is probably, I think we saw Micah and Zachary and have resigned themselves to the fact they're going to get back across, and the bottom line is, at the moment, probably having 4 of them is better than being in 2 groups of 2, because then they can save a bit more energy, as you'll get a little bit more rest time in that 4-man rotation than you would in a 2-man rotation.
It remains to be seen quite what motivation remains in the group of riders who have been dropped by that quartet up the road now. Certainly Sebastian Reichenbach will be intent on riding as hard as he can, right to the very end if his legs will allow, starting the day 11 minutes and 41 down, and within about 15 or so seconds at one point in today's race of taking a virtual podium position in the general classification. So he could be careering up the GC standings.
And it would appear the yellow jersey group is down to only 16 riders now, so that's pretty impressive without it having actually been any attacks, any acceleration from Astana. And now we have this group of 4. Pantano's gone straight through, so he's aware this is the time to make this stick.
But don't forget, Jarlinson Pantano rides for a team in I Am Cycling that are disbanding at the end of the year. So too does Rafa Majka. So in terms of putting themselves in the shop window, I mean, everyone knows what both these men can do. They're established World Tour riders. Nonetheless, this is happy timing. Julian Alaphilippe taking his share at the front, and Ilnur Zakarin recovered and back into racing after breaking his collarbone on a descent on the Giro d'Italia at high altitude, freezing cold conditions back in May. And the yellow jersey group is approaching the top of the Grand Colombier for the first time. That's about the size of it. Not much remains of what was a big group, but all the favourites are there. No one's dropped out of contention. The white jersey of Adam Yates. Some of the riders who were in the original breakaway group have been swept up and are able to just maintain contact with this group for now. So it's swelling in numbers as it picks up riders, and there's a significant rider as well for Fabio Aru, who's somewhere up the road in front of him, and that is Vincenzo Nibali. He was on the attack in that first breakaway group, attacked with Tom Dumoulin, but he will be sitting up, and at some point this group will make contact with him as well. It's good news for Fabio Aru. Always assuming that Nibali is in a mood to work for the other Italian in the Astana team with Grand Tour credentials. Don't forget, Fabio Aru, already a Grand Tour winner in his own right of the Vuelta a España.
And at the front of the race, it looks like we have Reichenbach, Vuillermoz and Pauls, who are not far off joining onto that leading group of 4. So the descent is allowing these groups to come back together slightly.
7 minutes and 44, that's the difference on the road between the quartet of riders and this group, which is just about to go over the top of the Grand Colombier. And then it's downhill. And after about 9 kilometres, they enter a circuit which will take them over the finishing line with 23.5 kilometres to go. And then a kilometre after that, they're back up over the Grand Colombier. As if once wasn't enough, they have to do it twice over the Lacet du Grand Colombier. That climb's still to come. 4 riders, though, are descending, and there is Sebastian Reichenbach, who's trying to get on terms with them. He's got Alexis Vuillermoz from Étoile La Mondiale for company. Can they get back on and make it a group of 6 who are contesting the stage win today? Welcome back. Diego Rosa leads Astana and their team leader Fabio Aru down the Grand Colombier. In about 10 kilometres, that's where they're heading, down to the banks of the River Rhône. And this is where the great river has its source, up in the Alps. That's where they're heading, and in about 10 kilometres, the crowd that have gathered here in baking hot sunshine at Culo will get their first glimpse of the race. Having said that, David, there are 2 races, and quite distinct races at that. Rafa Majka and Jarlinson Pantano appear to have a small advantage at this point over the other 2. There were 4 riders, or are they chasing Julian Alaphilippe?
I think Alaphilippe is leaves them in his wake.
Yeah.
I mean, Alaphilippe, we know, he's been becoming known for his very young career so far as a classics rider, but we don't actually know where his capabilities lie. I think at the moment he could do almost anything, it seems like, but descending is one of them. The fact he can be up there in this one-day classics means he has exceptional bike handling skill. But this is the 2 riders chasing behind Vuillermoz and
It's not actually, it's Serge Pauwels.
Serge Pauwels in front.
And Sebastian Reichenbach.
Reichenbach and Reichenbach and Pauwels.
Yeah, so Serge Pauwels appears to be descending better than Sebastian Reichenbach. Alaphilippe appears to be descending better than anyone in the bike race at the moment. Don't forget, this is the front of the race. This is the breakaway. Jarlinson Pantano and Rafa Majka are chasing him. At the moment, though, there's no sign of Ilnur Zakarin, who is not the world's best descender.
No, we saw him getting clearly dropped, not being able to hold these 2 and missing corners, and a little bit the same as Reichenbach here, who did an exceptional climb. We saw that, but again, now Serge Pauwels is leaving him behind. So that we can see how hard they're racing. It's coming down here because they're going to come off here, and they've only got a few Ks. Well, they'll still have about 8 Ks of flat off here. So it's best to be in a little group. If you're on your own, then you're going to waste a lot of energy before you hit the last stage of Grand Colombier. So it's actually, at the moment, Rafa Majka and Pantano seem to be in the best position, and this again could just be a clever move by Majka, because if he attacks and finds himself on his own, then he'll be tiring himself before he hits this next and final climb.
Well, Rafa Majka has got himself one objective nailed down already. He's won himself the King of the Mountains jersey on the day. He'll be wearing it tomorrow, so that's one achievement already, but he's eyeing up a stage win. That's what his Tour de France is all about, the Polish road race champion. Especially now that he doesn't even have to think about working for Alberto Contador, because there is no Alberto Contador on the race. Free to do as he pleases, and that's exactly what he's doing.
Now, actually, we said that red car in front would indicate that these are the front 2 on the road. So Alaphilippe, I'm hoping there's not been an incident or...
Has been dropped?
Yeah,
maybe
at the moment, because for sure normally that red car is the lead car. And there's Zakarin.
And who's he getting up to there? Vuillermoz. So
Vuillermoz.
I don't quite know. So clearly
Alaphilippe is missing at the moment.
Alaphilippe has gone missing in action slightly.
There's Reichenbach.
And that's Serge Pauwels in front of him, and ahead of him you can still see that pairing of Vuillermoz and Ilnur Zakarin. And so the only missing part of this puzzle is the blue jersey of Julian Alaphilippe at the moment. But it's amazing how differently riders descend and what advantages you can get over your rivals, and how you can match yourselves on the climb, or you can climb better and come over in a group, but then it all blows apart. And that's quite instructive as we watch the GC race tackle this descent for the first time. Remember, they do it twice as well.
Yeah, we can also see how important the descent is as well. Often riders get to the top, they're relieved to have got to the top of the climb and switch off slightly. I mean, we saw it in a small but massive scale on the day when Christopher Froome attacked over the top. That's because people just let out a deep breath, so satisfied to have made it with the front group that then they don't think Alaphilippe crashed. So I hope he's okay.
Well, that explains that. Julian Alaphilippe has crashed. That does not say that he's abandoned, but it does say that he's crashed. So we'll try and get more information on that as soon as we can. Of course, it's not the first time that Julian Alaphilippe has crashed on this Tour de France, most spectacularly of all in the individual time trial. Those pictures of him flying through the air towards the rock face, David, were almost inexplicable. You actually were drawing parallels with motorbike racing with me.
Yeah, it looked like the image is he's about 2 meters up a cliff face. It looks like he might have sort of high-sided, and then because the wind was so strong, just got blown up slightly and accentuated the crash. But it is definitely one of the most spectacular images I've ever seen of cycling.
This is Tête de la Corse, and 2 of the strongest, it has to be said, there for good reason. Jarlinson Pantano from IM Cycling, the Colombian climber, and Rafa Majka, the Polish climber, the King of the Mountains on the road. Zakarin just pushes Sebastian Reichenbach into this pace line. They've got 4 good men here in Alexis Villemors, Serge Pauwels, Reichenbach and Zakharine. So it's a 4-man team time trial, although it doesn't look terribly unified at the moment against these two who are sharing the work equally.
Yeah, they found themselves in the perfect... There's Alaphilippe coming back on, so
Still
that's
in the
good.
race.
That's very good to see, because the speed he was going down, he dropped everyone, so you do worry that he may have
It looks
gone
okay.
down at high speed.
Looks okay.
He does.
And that's a team car, obviously, that he's talking to, and not the white car of the doctor, which is another good sign. Well, he's hard as nails, really, isn't he, Alaphilippe?
Yeah, it looks like he's going straight through.
That's the, is that the Groupe Roland?
That's the Zachary.
There's Steve Morabito. Steve Morabito is coming past, and Danny Navarro straight past him. And there's Domenico Pozzovivo, and Butarski and Nelson Oliveira. See ya. I'm off. This is a strong ride from this man.
Yeah, he's not at all given up, so 1 minute 35. So, though, of course, the problem is if he'd had a crash, and even if it wasn't so bad, he might have just overshot a corner, which, considering the speed he was going at, could have easily happened. And with, we see him here somewhere, there he is on the right, I think, just up ahead. He'll have to have waited for, there he is. And yeah, I don't think he crashed, might have had a mechanical or...
Yeah,
it's hard to tell.
He looks to be moving okay, and there's no evidence there that he's hit the deck.
No, and of course the problem is that your team cars are so far behind, they're scattered, and that was the problem that Chris Froome had on Von 2. At that point in the race, the commissaires, the race referees are creating barrages between groups, so, and they wait until the gaps between each riders are fairly constant and secure before they start sending vehicles forward. So his car, no doubt, was a couple of minutes behind, caught behind riders in that descent, the scattered groups everywhere, so that is one of the more frustrating things.
And this is a circuit race they're on now, so some of the signage on the road in your shots might get a little bit confusing. Don't be confused. They are 4 kilometres away from passing over the finish line here in Culot for the first time, but not for the real time. Then they go out, and within a kilometre they're climbing up the Lacet du Grand Colombier from the south side. Totally different climb, 8.4 kilometres in length and steeper than the first descent.
There's Alaphilippe. He's probably given that group a fresh impetus, because up to there, no doubt, they were just drifting back and just struggling and a little bit resigned to their fate. But when you have a rider coming, Alaphilippe, who's obviously
still intent
and still wanting to keep it moving, that will really help that group. And this is the group ahead of them that they can now try and get back on terms with, because this is the group chasing the 2 riders that are leading the race, and then behind this group is that group that Alaphilippe finds himself in. And that's it, and you can see how all of a sudden this group's working a lot better, because they can probably see that 4 riders. And is there another mechanical?
Again. Yeah, he's dropping back, looking for his team car, Julien Alaphilippe. So he's nothing if not entertaining us at the moment, Julien Alaphilippe. He's either off the road or he's attacking everybody, going straight past him. He looks highly animated.
He does, doesn't he?
What's going on? He's banging his handlebars. Something's really annoyed him.
That's just a young...
Chucking a water bottle.
That's just... Well, of course he's going to be annoyed. If he'd had a problem, and it looked like he had more mechanical than anything else, where that crash happened, it wasn't in a corner. Well, crash, that's what it said on the screen before. But you'll just be angry that he was up there leading the Tour de France stage off the Grand Colombier, potentially going to be fighting out the stage win, and he gets compromised because of something going wrong with his bike or a silly mistake he made. Either way, he's angry at himself, or he's angry at the equipment, or he's angry at the race. I just think he's angry.
There is a touch of the Nasser Bouhannis about Julien Alaphilippe.
He's definitely got attitude. I mean, he's such a young rider, and we can see the way he races, and the fact that he raced down that descent was borderline crazy.
What's he?
But yeah, it's...
body language is all over the place at the moment. I wondered how much adrenaline there was in that shot that we got of him just ripping past everyone as well. More adrenaline than sense, possibly, at that point.
Yeah.
But there we go. It's good to watch, and it's animating the race. Now, has he scooped up Vincenzo Nibali?
Yes, they have, yeah.
So, Fabio Aru now has Vincenzo Nibali and Diego Rosa, who are 2 of the very best climbers in the world, lining things up for him. So that's good news for Astana. They've played that tactic beautifully well today, and it's paid off.
I'm not sure how much Nibali will be able to contribute, though, when we saw that he wasn't able to stay with the best climbers at the front of the race. But at the same time, he may have realised that he didn't have the legs to win, so I may as well shut it down now and try and do my bit for the team. So it will have been a combo. But I still don't think that he'll be able to do too much regards setting this up when they come to the Lacet du Grand Colombier. But he will be able to ride now in this valley.
And Jon Izagirre has been added to the numbers of Movistar riders as well. So that's worked out exactly as we expected. Astana and Movistar, having placed riders in the breakaway, have now benefited from them in the final. 25.1k to go. The group of the yellow jersey have hit the valley floor and they rattle along on flat roads until they go through the finishing line at 23.5k, where this group are now. So this is the finishing funnel. This is the Flamme Rouge for the final time, but not for now. They've still got a Category 1 climb to come before they'll see this kite for real. Question is, will Pantano and Majka, when they see it next time, be disputing the stage win?
Well,
no certainty of that whatsoever.
Pantano has looked incredibly strong, and there's no doubt that Majka will be racing for the stage win now that he's got the points jersey, well, the climbers jersey wrapped up for today, and he's got a guaranteed second place over that climb if they can hold that gap, so he doesn't need to fight that out. So it'll be a case of Majka really wanting to pursue this stage victory now.
There he is, Rafa Majka, taking a drink and flinging a water bottle crowdwards, where it'll be swept up and probably on eBay already. Flick of the elbow and a stretch of the legs, getting their heads ready and their limbs relaxed for the final climb of the day, the Lacet du Grand Colombier. They hear the bell. That's traditional on a circuit race. It means one more lap to go, and out they go over the mountain, a different way up. An outstretched arm from Rafa Majka, looking for some more assistance, maybe another bottle. He's only got a kilometre to take a drink before he goes uphill again. Pantano setting a really good pace here. They've got a 7.5 minute advantage as they come over the finishing line to huge applause from the crowd. Pantano leads them through. This is the second group on the road. It features Ilnur Zakarin, the Russian rider for Katusha, the Belgian rider who you saw on the Stage 2 Mont Ventoux, finishing in second place to Thomas de Gendt, Serge Pauwels for Dimension Data. On his wheel, a former stage winner of the Tour de France, Alexis Villamoz, from AG2R La Mondiale, who won at the Mur de Bretagne. And the man best placed in the general classification, not only for FDJ, but of all the riders up the road, Sebastian Reichenbach, the Swiss rider, formerly of IM Cycling, these days wearing the colours of essentially the French national team. And leading the way in the absence of Thibaut Pinot, this group now take the bell, and they're going to have to make up nearly a minute, if not more, on the group up the road of Majka and Pantano. They're going to have to start working together. They've got no choice. They've got to share the work. They do have strength in numbers, but they've got two of the best riders to catch.
We're the Alaphilippe group coming through, so Tom Slatcher's made it back up, so he'll be Alaphilippe still.
He's got his angry head on.
Yeah, he's not happy with how that group's working, so he's better to just get away with it. He did a little nod to that rider as if to say, come on, let's go. It's
Kozarski.
Yeah, sometimes you're in a group and it just doesn't feel like it's really moving, and Pierre Rolland finally tries to kind of do something there. It's almost as if they're resigned to their fate.
So which is going to explode first? Will it be the GC race that is threatening to explode, or will it quite simply be Julian Alaphilippe himself? He's furious, he wants the stage win. These men want to put time into the yellow jersey and hurt Chris Froome for the first time on this Tour de France. Welcome back, just in time to see the Astana train lead them through the bell lap. They go over the finishing line, a lick of the lips from Wout Poels, a glance over his shoulder from the yellow jersey, and Astana are putting on a show of force as they head out with 23.5 kilometres remaining. That's the yellow jersey group. Up the road, well, Rafa Majka and Jarlinson Pantano from IM Cycling have the lead of the race, and they have a group of 4 trying to chase them, but they look like they're the strongest. Rafa Majka leading them up the Lacet du Grand Colombier, an 8-kilometre climb. Over the previous climb, Majka had attacked with Ilnur Zakarin. They'd gone over the top, and then Julian Alaphilippe had reacted, and he tried to bridge a gap and had bridged a gap across to them. Then Alaphilippe had to stop for a mechanical, and he's further down the road in a group at the moment, furiously angry with the situation, and they are trying to chase a bigger group onto that group of 4 chasers who you just saw. Meanwhile, coming over the line is Geraint Thomas. He's been dropped somewhere on the descent off the Grand Colombier. We didn't see what happened to him, but Sky have a numerical disadvantage in the yellow jersey group. Fabio Aru, their team leader, has 3 domestiques working for him, and Chris Froome has only, I say only, Mikkel Niemi and Wout Poels alongside him, so something's happened to Geraint Thomas.
Yeah, I wonder if he had an incident in the descent. It seems unlikely he would have been dropped, because he went over the top with that group, so there must have been a mechanical.
Well, a Tour de France without a fall isn't a Tour de France for Geraint Thomas, and he tends to finish every single one of them as well. That's what it looks like, that numerical advantage. Vincenzo Nibali, Jakob Fuglsang, Diego Rosa, and then the white helmet of Fabio Aru. Astana are definitely trying to set things up for an attack from Aru. Having said that, Nibali appears to have sat up.
Well, he did his job in the valley. He's obviously not feeling at his best, so he did save them from working on the flatlands, and he did what he could then, knowing he wouldn't be able to contribute so much when they hit the climb. And now it's back over to Diego Rosa and Fuglsang. Though I'm not so sure how much Fuglsang can do, because he appeared to be in difficulty on the last climb, so he'll probably do the... Oh, no, there he goes.
Yeah.
That's Nibali.
That's Vincenzo Nibali. So all these riders who you're seeing going out to the back actually featured in the 30-man breakaway today. Jérôme Coppel, who you just saw waving goodbye to the camera. Alberto Losada from Katusha. They can't really be expected, having been out there on, well, 5 categorised climbs already today. This is the 6th, to be of much assistance at this point. Meanwhile, that's the back of the group of favourites, and Ruben Plaza, who again, he was in the breakaway earlier on today, and Jan Polans from Lampre Merida. They're survivors of that breakaway, but there's the white jersey of Adam Yates. He's the first of the favourites who are honing into view as the motorbike moves up through that group of remaining GC riders.
And he's still got one teammate with him, so Ruben Plaza's done a great job today, because normally at this point in the race he's a little isolated, Adam Yates, as his team isn't really built up of climbers. So that's going to be reassuring for him, although fingers crossed Ruben Plaza can last at least half the climb, so that if there are any issues that he has, he can help. Alaphilippe once again with this group, this chasing group with Pierre Rolland. And he's accelerating again. Mike has made a
move. So Jonathan Pantano is in the momentary difficulty. Can he respond to this acceleration as they go through 20 kilometres to go? At least the chase group do, being headed by Ilnur Zakarin from Katusha, with Sebastian Reichenbach of FDJ, Alexis Villamoz in the company of Serge Pauwels. But Maika has decided to make his move very, very early, it has to be said, with 5.6 kilometres to go to the top of the Lacet du Grand Colombier. Shorter, but steeper than the preceding climb of the Grand Colombier.
And what's remarkable, we can see how he's having to really dig deep here. Pantano
he's not beaten, is he?
No, he's not yet. Pantano's just sitting at this a steady, not letting that gap get any bigger beyond the initial attack. But Pantano also knows that Mike has been attacking since the 17-kilometre mark on the first climb. He made the first big move, so he's been at it all day. And although he was riding intelligently once he got in the move, letting the other riders attack first, he has been at it since the very beginning of the stage. So Pantano knows that he's going to be tired, even if he has put a slight gap into him now. He's just got to stay cool and not let the gap get any bigger.
So that's the situation on the road. Maika is on his own. Pantano's holding on to him, though. Those two have a 37-second gap, and there they are. And Pantano has closed the gap to that group of 4, being headed by Ilnur Zakarin. The Alaphilippe group, in the company of Pierre Rolland, is closing in. So it's coming together a little bit on the Lacet du Grand Colombier. And that chase group could well be doubling in size fairly soon.
Yeah, the more these two play around, the more it plays into the hands of these chasing groups. We see here Zakarin, who we know is a strong. The only reason he's in this position was because he was dropped in the descent. That's the Katusha rider. So that's perfect for that group. They can sit on Zakarin because he's going to be furious with himself, as Alaphilippe is in this group that's chasing that, because he missed out. So that's 2 riders who were actually with those top 4 strongest in the race. Now there's only 2 of them left at the front, but there's 1 each, and the group's chasing behind. So it's not as if those groups are made up of weaker riders.
And it is one of those days when it is almost certainly a race within a race. That 6-minute advantage should be enough for the likes of Maika. I'm pretty sure of that, to contest and determine the stage win among them. Meanwhile, this is the 3rd group on the road, and Bartosz Szarski from Bora Argon 18 goes to the top of that group and takes his place at the front. Zakarin leads them through 5 kilometres. Further up the road, Pantano has reacted brilliantly well to that acceleration by Rafa Maika. So it didn't work on this occasion.
Zaccarin's not even asking for help from the other riders. They can see, they can just see up ahead, so that's going to help them massively. They're only about 200 metres, less than 200 metres behind them, so you see that red car. So this is, for Serge Pauwels, that's a perfect situation.
Alaphilippe is charging up the mountain. Zaccarin is leading a group of 4 back to the riders. The stage win is still very much up for grabs on the slopes of the Grand Colombier. Welcome back. Wout Poels has the race under control again, but that's not always been the case. Fabio Aru attacked, Alejandro Valverde went over the top and joined him briefly, and those 2 riders have been sucked back in by the Sky Train once again, being led by Wout Poels. So far, so good for Chris Froome and the yellow jersey. So far, so good too for the white jersey of Adam Yates, who's just at the back, being marked all the way by Louis Meintjes from Lampre Merida. Richie Porte is still there, so too is TJ Van Garderen, Roman Kreuziger, Joaquim Rodriguez, Fabio Aru, Quintana and Valverde alongside each other, Bauke Mollema and Romain Bardet sitting close to Chris Froome, who's talking to his team car. And is Chris Froome thinking about attacking, I wonder, today?
I don't know. It's hard to tell whether he'd risk it or sometimes, because it's going to be a technical descent, and I think everybody is anticipating Romain Bardet attacking with about 500 metres or less to try and do the descent.
Further up the road, this is the battle for the stage win, and Sebastian Reichenbach and Alexis Villamoz are trying to get on the coattails of Ilnur Zaccarin, who's just a much more powerful climber than either of these 2 men, and he's dropped them. Alexis Villamoz has done very well to be in this position on the stage, but I don't think the stage win is in their compass today. Ilnur Zaccarin has gone, and he's gone off in pursuit of the men in front of him on the road, and they are Jarlinson Pantano and Rafa Majka. Let's have a look. There's Majka, just going out of the shots on the right, and there is Pantano in the white jersey. And the 3rd rider on the road should be Ilnur Zaccarin. At least last time we saw him, that's where he was on the road. Until we see him, though, we don't know for definite, but what is sure is that Rafa Majka has dropped Pantano.
Yeah, the fact he's got his team car there now goes to show that the commissaires can see that gap is continuously growing, so hence why the team car will have been given the right to move up.
Well, almost as a side issue at this point, because Rafa Majka is thinking firmly about a stage win, the prospect of 10 more points in the King of the Mountains competition. He'll already wear the jersey, whatever happens at the end of today, but he'll get 10 more and he'll take a healthy lead in that competition at the end of the day, if he gets over the top in 2.8 kilometres alone. Those are the Lacets du Grand Colombier, a totally different climb in characteristics from the north side of this mountain. Tight hairpins all the way up. Wonderful shot from the helicopter. Groups scattered all the way down the road, and that's the yellow jersey group just getting onto that tight section now.
And we can see behind the yellow jersey group there's just empty road for a long way beyond those cars, so there's been a lot of damage today. Although there hasn't been so much attacking from that yellow jersey group, we can see the level of fatigue that's definitely in. Zaccarin we've seen nowhere, so I'm wondering whether Zaccarin had an issue, or because he was really driving this group up, maybe they just played him like a fiddle and let him do all his work until he exploded. Then Reichenbach and Villamoz attacked him.
Yeah, absolutely right, because they're bearing down now on Jarlinson Pantano. So right. They are the 3rd and 4th riders on the road, which is mysterious to say the least.
Reichenbach's having a great day today. He's looking like one of the strongest on the Grand Colombier, and he's not losing ground at all at the moment, so this is a very positive ride for him, and a little bit of a move for him on the GC as well.
Indeed, he started the day best placed of 30 riders who went up the road at 11:41. And if he takes a few more minutes, that's good news for him. He leads effectively the FDJ GC campaign now. No Thibaut Pinot, although he was already out of GC contention by the time he abandoned, suffering from bronchitis. That is wonderful. And it's not just the yellow jersey group climbing, it's the convoy of cars. Just the whole spectacle, snaking their way through the shoelaces, the Lacets du Grand Colombier. Nature of the road doesn't allow the massive crowds that we saw on Mont Ventoux to get up on this mountain, so it's free passage for Rafa Majka at this point. No threat of a repeat performance of a running man of Mont Ventoux. The crowds are close, but they're not vast. Smoke spilling from the crowd, just obscuring the vision now of Jarlinson Pantano as he heads into that section. And Reichenbach has dropped Villamoz, and he is hunting down the Colombian. And pretty soon, I think Reichenbach might well be the second on the road. And then he'll have Rafa Majka in his sights.
It's a great ride. He's paced it perfectly. It looks like Pantano, when he tried to stay on terms with Majka, has blown himself up because he's going backwards, contrary to Reichenbach, who just keeps moving forward. Majka, I think he's fairly steady at the moment. He's looking like he's in control of the effort, but he won't know yet for sure that Reichenbach's moving up towards him.
And regardless of what order and with what gaps they get over the top, and then don't forget there's still 2.2 kilometres of climbing to go. If you can't descend, you're not going to be able to defend your advantage over the top of this climb. This descent is technical and difficult. And it did for Ilnur Zakarin on the descent, and something has done for Ilnur Zakarin on the ascent of that. We're not quite sure what happens, but we do know that Zakarin is out of contention for the stage.
While Paul's looking like he's got this completely under control, pacing this effort.
It's just checkmate, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's checkmate in the GC group. It has to be said. There's nothing they can do. I mean, you talk for all the world about why don't BMC attack, why don't Movistar attack? Well, Astana attacked, Movistar went over the top, and it was just nullified within minutes.
Oh, well, Paul's is one of the, if not the strongest, next to Chris Froome, one of the strongest climbers in this group. So that's a daunting prospect. Romain Bardet, who's sitting there now, everyone's talked about him today. He's been quiet all day. We know he's won stage the Dauphiné Tour de France last year after attacking within sight of the summit and doing exceptional descents. And that's where that skill could come in handy today. But a lot of those riders will be expecting that, and they'll have to make a decision whether they risk it and go with him, because he will descend like an absolute nutter. And, well, I don't know, I think it would be something like Richie Porte, a nice move to try and go with.
That's the next move we're expecting. The Fabio Aru attack that happened was telegraphed slightly and ineffective ultimately. It lasted a few minutes and then came to nothing. And the man who tracked it all back is still unbelievably on the front of this climb. They've got a little bit longer to climb. This man has 1.6 kilometres to get over the top of the final climb of the day on his own and start the descent towards Culo. What's the gap like, and who to, effectively? Well, it's Reichenbach, and Jarlinson Pantano's with him.
And interestingly, the car's been pulled out, so they can see that he's moving up.
The Sky Train are doing it again. 5 minutes they have over, or I should say, back on the solo figure of Rafa Majka. This is the group of favourites. The yellow jersey just pulling over to the side to see who's still there, and when he looks over, he will see that they're all pretty much still there, but that doesn't mean they can do much about it. They certainly don't look, any of them at the moment, like they're about to launch an attack, like it's imminent. Bauke Mollema just sitting on the train now of Team Sky and allowing the yellow jersey to draw up alongside him. The white jersey of Adam Yates still looking comfortable towards the rear of the group of favourites, but not like a man who wants to attack, like a man who wants to hang on to his podium position and defend, and why not?
They look like TJ Van Garderen just slipping back slightly there, so that gives an indication. Although Adam Yates is sitting at the back, he is in control, because the fact he can just get out his saddle and move up a couple of places, that's impossible to do if you're on your red line.
Well, what was that? A little acceleration, almost out of anger actually, with Chris Froome there, just reasserting himself at the front. And my word, with each passing stage of each passing Tour de France, he just becomes more and more the boss. We've seen running Froome, that was angry Froome.
That was a strange move.
He's an unconventional rider, Chris Froome.
Almost taunting them to do something.
How far to go? Yeah, 15 kilometres to go until the finish line.
So only 1 kilometre to the summit or less. So this is actually a good move for Reichenbach, because Pantano is an exceptional descender, and he's also strong on the flat. Now they don't have much flat off this. It's false flat descent once they come off the descent of about 7 kilometres. But
Romain Bardet attack. Sorry, David. Romain Bardet, as expected, he's gone near the summit. He's got a few kilometres to negotiate before he gets to the top of the Lacet du Grand Colombier, and then it's all about the descent for this man. This is his local patch. He knows the Jura Mountains exceptionally well. If any of these riders riders bothered to pick up L'Équipe, the national sports newspaper today, they would have understood that Romain Bardet was expected to do this. The whole French country was willing him to do this, crying out for an effective attack on the yellow jersey to move this man up into a podium position, if at all possible. So, what can Bardet do? He has launched his attack, and meanwhile, Rafa Majka goes over the top, and he's on the descent that Bardet is about to negotiate.
But he's still got 5 minutes of climbing, so he's attacked earlier than we expected him to, which isn't necessary because he knows, because Wout Poels can peg him back. All he needed to do really was go with 500 metres from the summit, because all he wants is 10 seconds as Pantano now leads the chase with Reichenbach on his wheel. Now it's Pantano who's going to go and try and bring this back on the descent.
So that's the race for the stage win. He gets out of the saddle, does Romain Bardet again, and tries to stretch out his advantage, and it is a proper gap that has opened up between him and Wout Poels, who's still working at the front of the Team Sky train. Ignore, if you can, the rider for IM Cycling there. That's Jérôme Coppel. He's simply falling back out of the group of breakaway riders from earlier on in the day, but Wout Poels is still able to take on a drink and continue his job. But this is a decent ride from Romain Bardet. He's gone earlier than expected, but he's got a little gap, David.
No, he's clearly only gone early because he feels so strong, because he is taking a gap, and we haven't seen anybody take a gap from Wout Poels. Now, granted, Wout Poels is just sitting at control pace because he doesn't need to worry so much about Bardet. He's not one of the primary competitions, concurrents, when it comes to the GC, but even that they'll respect him and won't let him get too far, and they want to set a pace that's fierce enough to deter anybody else from attacking, because look, Bauke Mollema's still there, and Richie Poels, so no one else is actually going off it, so you can see how high the pace is of Wout Poels.
That's right. A notable absentee from this group though, TJ van Garderen, unable to live with that pace. So Richie Porte, if he had a bad day in terms of his BMC rival at the individual time trial, he's putting time back in his favour relative to TJ van Garderen today.
And looking at this descent, this is the perfect sort of descent that Bardet excels in this terrain. He likes the windy, technical. Pantano has left Reichenbach by the looks of it, so we knew Pantano was good at descending, and he's proving that. So yeah, Reichenbach, they've missed an opportunity there if that is the case.
Poels, Nieve, Froome, Mollema, Bardet going backwards, is he? Well, it looked good, and he's still got an advantage, but he did go early, and he's going to have to hang on. And this man is just riding a phenomenal Tour de France for Chris Froome. He will eventually, surely, will he not hand over to Mikel Nieve, maybe for the final kilometre or so, but he has pulled everything back for the yellow jersey, except Romain Bardet.
Well, no, in theory, Wout Poels should just set a pace that can get him to the summit if he can, because it's better for Chris Froome to have two riders around him for this final 15 kilometres, because otherwise, if something happens, one of them will have to give the bike or a wheel, then he needs another teammate with him to help him work. So it's better that Wout Poels doesn't blow himself trying to bring back Romain Bardet, who isn't a primary threat. So he's just going to leave him there. Eyes just dropped to the glasses. That's not ideal for the descent that he's about to do.
Yeah. Perhaps a sign of the exertion, and is he getting a little bit ragged? Romain Bardet beginning to lose his composure. He just needs to dig in. He's still got a few kilometres of climbing to go until they go over the top two. Maybe it's a bit closer than that. 4 minutes and 37 is the disadvantage relative to Majka from the yellow jersey group. That's of scant relevance. They're in a battle all of their own. I reckon there's about a minute or so until Bardet gets to the top. That's the moment he's lost his specs there.
So the thing is with Bardet, so the gap he has there, it's about 30 metres, 40 metres. That's all he really needs. If he can get that to 50 metres over the summit, that's the sort of gap he needs to then make a difference. He can extend that. And Mikel Nieve was just taking over there from Wout Poels.
Whoa, what's happened to Rafa Majka here? Overcooking a corner, going off-piste into the grass and back onto the tarmac. That'll have cost him a few seconds. Pantano, don't forget, is the man chasing him down. And Reichenbach has actually gone back to Villermoz, so Sebastian Reichenbach not enjoying this greatly. It's allowed Alexis Villermoz to join forces with him. Don't forget, there's flat kilometres to negotiate too, so maybe that's not the worst thing for Reichenbach. And Villermoz's teammate, team leader, Romain Bardet, continues just to dangle off that group of favourites.
So they're trying to bring him back by the descent. See, Wout Poels took over slightly, let Mikel Nieve take over. And here we have an attack from Mollema.
Yeah, Mollema.
Oh, it's moving up, I think.
Just moving up into position.
They'll all be aware of how dangerous that descent is. I mean, we're seeing it from the images from the front riders and the fact Majka just missed that corner. They'll all want to be in the top 5, because if gaps can easily open up if one of the riders makes a mistake. Oh, but they brought him back on the lines. They timed that to perfection.
Well,
but he
still has just done a job on Romain Bardet. He attacked, he tried to get a gap over the top, and do you know what? it didn't work, and Wout Poels made sure that it didn't. Majka is hunting down a stage win, though, in an unconventional frame-hugging aero tuck. What we don't know is how far back Jarlinson Pantano is. We haven't seen him for a while.
I think to add insult to injury coming over the summit there, Romain Bardet got swamped by the Sky Riders and wasn't even able to get the bottle that he was trying to reach out for. So yeah, that was none of that's gone to plan for him. But I'm sure he'll still try in the descent because he was still in first or second position as they started it.
Majka, not without incident this descent so far. A little wobble or two on his way down towards Culoz and the finish line that is beckoning for him, and a potential 4th stage win on the Tour de France to add to his illustrious campaign. Got up and running in 2014 with a couple of stage wins, added another one last year, Rafa Majka. And is he going to ride out a 4th victory there? No, well, maybe not. Here's the Colombian, the IAM cycling rider, who was dropped on the climb by Rafa Majka, who had to attack him twice to get the job done. But on the descent, well, Pantano's the better man at this point anyway, and he's about to make the junction. So we're going to have a proper duel for the stage win. Don't think that either Reichenbach or Villermoz, who are chasing this pair, have the firepower to get across and make it 4 contenders for the stage victory. I think it might be between these two.
Well, that was an excellent descent by Pantano. He's timed it to perfection because he's just catching him as they're coming off the descent. So I think he brought back about 20 seconds or so. That's no mean feat in a descent like this. As you can see, the difference in these two, they don't look as fluid and as fast. So this is a descent that will suit the proper descenders.
They've got to work together for a bit. The dueling is going to have to wait, maybe until the final kilometre. A flick of the elbow from Pantano. He wants Majka to work with him. Majka doesn't appear to want to. But they know that Reichenbach and Villermoz are not too far behind them, so they've got to commit together and make this a 2-man time trial before they can start to punch each other up and fight for the win.
And they'll know all this running. They've already done it once before, so that's quite a rare thing in professional cycling, to know the finish you're coming into, so that will help both of them. When it comes to tactics they apply now, I'm not sure who out of them is going to be the better sprinter. It's fairly equally matched.
Well, it's not really their territory, is it? Neither of them are sprinters, both are pure climbers. Of this pairing, though, you'd probably favour Alexis Villermoz if they can get to the finish line together. Further up the road, though, Pantano, drink of water from him. Majka leading the way. So now Majka is doing the work, and he has Pantano on his wheel, just resting temporarily before it's his turn to move to the front. Yeah, he's looked super strong.
Well, this has proved to be a very successful day for Rafa Majka, even if it stays like this. He's scored almost maximum points in all the mountains, and I think probably if he'd set out today knowing that was going to happen, he'd been pretty satisfied. The fact he's done that and survived to battle out the stage win is, I don't think he'd have believed that at the beginning of the day. Or maybe he did, because the way he rode off in that first climb,
it's full of intent, wasn't it?
Yeah,
and self-belief. I don't think he's a rider who lacks either intent or self-belief, Rafa Majka.
No, I agree.
There's a degree of swagger about him, let's put it that way.
No, he's... Oh, there you go. There's one of the Sky Riders. So Nievi. So Nievi's gone off. Oh, that was the same corner, I think, where Majka went down.
It was. It looked frighteningly similar, didn't it? So I wonder what the reason for that was. Maybe just the severity of the bend in the road, or maybe something on the road. But Majka, sorry, not Majka, Nievi.
That means they're racing it behind, because obviously he wouldn't have overshot that corner unless they were really going for it. So I'm wondering whether Bardet has gone for it, or whether Sky were really setting the pace high to deter anybody from doing anything. Whatever it is, he's simply overshot it.
Well, we don't know what's happening in the GC race behind. We did see Bardet attack, but right at the top we saw a shot of him getting swamped by the black and blue of Wout Poels and Mikel Nieve in the company of the yellow jersey of Chris Froome. Since then, we've seen nothing of them other than Mikel Nieve just going off-road there temporarily.
And you could just see there, Majka, how long it took him to go round. So there was a flick of the elbow from Pantano, and Majka just waited a few seconds. He's just trying to do the minimum he can now, trying to save everything. It almost looks like Pantano's a little bit more nervous, is trying harder, and Majka's already switching off slightly, playing the games a little.
Now, Jarlinson Pantano finished in 3rd place on a not dissimilar stage last year on the Tour de France into Gap. That was a stage won by Ruben Plaza with Sagan in 2nd place, but Pantano showed how strong he was on that occasion.
And you saw there again the little flick of the elbow from Majka, and immediately Pantano came round. So he's being a little bit too eager, whereas Majka can read that immediately, because when when the elbow was flicked by Pantano, Majka just ignored it for about 5 or 10 seconds.
All right, we're back with the yellow jersey group on the descent. Wout Poels is there. There's the yellow jersey of Chris Froome, Richie Porte behind him. So Froome is upright and going down in the company of Wout Poels, even if Nieve has been dislocated from that group of favourites temporarily. This is the 2nd group on the road, and it's still Reichenbach who's doing all the work. And I wonder whether he's motivated, not especially by 3rd place, although that's going to look very good, but more seriously in terms of just bumping himself up the general classification into a solid top 10 by the end of the day. Meanwhile, that's the front of the descent, and Bardet, as you would expect, is the man in charge of the descent, with Alejandro Valverde on his wheel. Earpiece in.
So that's probably what's happened. Bardet's been pushing the descent with Valverde, and that's forced an error from Nieve, because Valverde is, as well, is one of the great descenders in professional cycling. So put the two of them together, and that will cause splits. You can see that's Joaquin Rodriguez at the back.
Yeah,
as Adam Yates in a little bit of a precarious position considering the splits, but no, it's all safe. It's come off, and there's no big splits. That's one of the Movistar riders from the break earlier in the day.
John Izagirre. 4 kilometres to go, though, for the pair who are going to be duelling out the stage win, unless Reichenbach can get across to them. But that gap now, I think, is too big to bridge. And Majka playing his old tricks again, as you suggest, David, possibly reading Pantano like a book. See, the problem is, for Pantano, this means everything to his career. A stage win on the Tour de France would eclipse anything that he's achieved by some distance. Whereas Rafa Majka has been there, done that, and done that again, and this would be a 4th. And that matters. That's self-confidence, that's belief, that understanding of how to play another rider on the biggest stage when your heart is pounding and your nerves are high. That's all playing into the favour of Rafa Majka. Romain Bardet has been reeled in, and so too has that descent, and Chris Froome just checking to see that all is well and all is calm, and he has everybody exactly where he wants him, including his domestique, Wout Poels, who's done a great job for him again, just gently pushed into the pace line by the yellow jersey.
So this is actually, I think, one of the reasons. There's probably 2 reasons Movistar riding. The fact that TJ Van Garden's been distanced, they want to keep him away because he's lying in 6th place, and Quintana and Valverde in 4th and 5th respectively. There's also the team classification that we talked about before. Movistar are up there, I think they're in 2nd place at the moment behind BMC, so this is an opportunity for them to take time back on BMC, which again would be a great move for them because they're a team that does really enjoy being at the front and leading the competition. They've won numerous times. Yeah, if we look at the team classification, they're only 2 minutes 30 and GC behind BMC Racing, so it's in their interest, Movistar, now to really move forward and try and because they have 3 riders there, and I think there's only 1 BMC rider ahead, or even not even.
I can't read that hand gesture, but it's not one of frustration. Chris Froome having a little energy gel, and another day looks like it has been safely negotiated. A day full of threat, principally because of Romain Bardet. It didn't stick this time. It has done in the past, most notably on the Tour de France last year. He took a brilliant stage win, courtesy of his descending skills. That's another day survived for Nairo Quintana, but another opportunity gone. If he wants to move himself into the podium, or even better, then the days are ticking by and Quintana's tour is slipping through his fingers.
So the only rider from the top 10 missing from that group is TJ Van Garderen. So everyone's made it safely through the day apart from him.
2 kilometres for Pantano and Majka. Pantano leads them through, Majka on his wheel. And that's the chase. This is the battle for 3rd and 4th. Too far down, I think, to affect Majka and Pantano. Reichenbach will be taking leaps in the general classification. Presumably take himself about 3 minutes, if not better. Improving his time, making it under top 10 and threatening the top 10 as well. Maybe won't be quite good enough for that, but nonetheless.
And no doubt Maika's doing a big turn now and trying to pull off just before the kilometre to go to put. And here's Pantano's going to come through without even being asked. We'll see what happens here. But normally you'd expect Maika to flick the elbow and try and get Pantano to take the lead, to lead him out for the sprint. Because we know Maika's a very astute tactically, and he's not the sort of person you want to play around with. Here we go. Yep, there you go. He's like, come on then, and he's going to do it. Oh no. That's exactly what Maika wanted him to do.
Under the Flamme Rouge, Rafa Maika has manoeuvred the Colombian. How much gap do they have actually over Villamos, who goes to the front now with Reichenbach? Well, surely it's enough. It's got to be 20 seconds.
20 seconds, which should be fine. But look,
this is... Well, Pantano feels like he's been...
Look how cool
put in
Maika
an
is.
uncomfortable position there, so there is a little slackening off of the pace, and I wonder if that will open the door for the two men who are chasing them down. Time enough for Rafa Maika to adjust his straps on his bling shoes, his brightly coloured shoes, the Tinkoff man, the Polish rider, the flamboyant, opportunist rider on occasions, the king of the mountains going into tomorrow. Can they sense that there's a little bit of an opportunity for Villamos and Reichenbach to get back on terms? Certainly Pantano just doesn't want to be there. He knows what Maika's game is. He understands that. They're both looking over their shoulder now. And Villamos and Reichenbach at this point hold nothing back.
So this is where Maika just keeps looking behind, make sure they don't catch. So, but look, now Pantano's picked up the speed because he's worried about those riders coming up. They're very matched, equally matched physically, these two, so it's all tactics now. And look, Maika seems to be so in control. Pantano's just got all nervous and keeps accelerating.
Well, that's the difference, possibly, between a winner and someone who's not quite made it on the highest stage of all just yet. Rafa Maika holds nothing back. He opens up his sprint. Can Pantano get back on terms? I think he might have even got past him. So the Colombian has done it. Rafa Maika had him just where he wanted him, except where it really mattered, and that was across the line. Jarlinson Pantano takes the win from Rafa Maika in second place. Alexis Villamos picks up third, and it's a brilliant day out for Sebastian Reichenbach, and a great win for IM Cycling and for Jarlinson Pantano. As a furious Julian Alaphilippe, who doesn't want to be finishing fifth, he wanted to be contesting the victory, and possibly had he not stopped for a mechanical, he might well have been today's winner. Serge Pauwels comes over the line, and one of the two Cannondale-Drapac riders in his company. But that was a brilliant win from Jarlinson Pantano, by far the biggest win of his career. He's only won one bike race up till now. That was this year on the Tour de Suisse. Now he's won two, and it's on the Tour de France.
That was a great win. He was, just as you said, very equally matched, and in the end it was Maika that made the mistake right to the last minute. He went too early, so he'd done everything right up till then, and just when it mattered, he got it wrong. So hats off to Pantano, because he beat him properly, and he looked like he was getting played, and ultimately he was the stronger rider and the smarter.
And the ever-willing, ever-combative Dani Navarro leads home, one of the strongest in that breakaway group. Ilnur Zakarin, who goes uphill so brilliantly and goes downhill so dreadfully, it has to be said. Zakarin, well, one day he might win a Grand Tour. He'll win plenty more bike races, but there is a weakness in his armoury, and he knows it. Slight mystery man on the day. We did see him going up the road, and then we lost sight of Ilnur Zakarin. He rolls over the line in the company of Dani Navarro. Bits and pieces of riders coming over now. Bartosz Szosarski and
Tom Sutcher.
Yeah, and Durasek.
The ride, probably the day, has been Alaphilippe. When we consider he was almost 2 minutes behind coming off the descent of the Grand Colombier.
Yeah, good point.
It's been magnificent what he's done to get within 22 seconds on the line.
Good point indeed. Tom Jutta-Schlafter from Cannondale-Drapac, the second of their riders over the line. That must have been Pierre Rolland, who finished before him. Bartosz Szosarski comes over, and Christian Durasek from Lampre Merida, the Croatian rider. Those three are the next two come over the line. The clock continues to tick over. The winner finished 2 minutes and 10 seconds ago, and this is the group of favourites now. And they are approaching the finishing line too, all intact except for TJ Van Garderen. So that's a key moment. Let's look as they cross the line to see just how much time TJ Van Garderen has lost, not only to the other men who matter in the general classification, but also to the man with the yellow helmet and the red kit just hiding behind Romain Bardet there, Richie Porte, who's delivered another blow to the American on his team as the race enters the Alps and the decisive week of racing. Adam Yates holds on to his white jersey, another good day for him and his course, his podium position. So too does Bauke Mollema, and why not have a sprint for for the line. Wout Poels is leading out Chris Froome for a sprint. He hasn't done enough work for his team leader yet, so here's a lead out, and Chris Froome nods his head, acknowledges another good day at the office, and one day closer to Paris. If he's the yellow jersey this time next week, he's won the Tour de France.
And that's been a great day as well for Movistar with 3 riders in that front group. That's going to jump them up the Team GC normally. So it's been a big losing day for BMC by the looks of it. TJ Van Garderen slipping down the class. We'll wait to see where he must be coming across soon. But also their team classification now is in jeopardy.
Well, TJ Van Garderen started the day at 3:19 and Richie Porte was at 4:27. So 1 minute and 8 seconds separated Porte from Van Garderen. Van Garderen 1 minute and 8 seconds better off than Richie Porte. So that would be an interesting timing to look at to see if TJ Van Garderen has lost more than 1 minute and 8 seconds, then effectively he's lost the lead of BMC. Look at those scenes though, the delight for this man in his team.
Well deserved, considering the way Michael was being all cool and playing the tactical game, and in the end it was Pantano that outwitted him right when in the last 250 metres.
And for the team, a team that's folding. Roger Kluge, their German sprinter, took a stage in dramatic fashion on the Giro d'Italia, and that was celebrated by all the team. And they've scored again on the Tour de France. Here's TJ Van Garderen, and he is coming on over the line. Well, it's a heavy time loss to Richie Porte. We'll stop the clock and we'll crunch the numbers and we'll find out whether or not Porte is now better off when we get the general classification to Richie Porte. But that was a brilliant race for the stage win. Even if the general classification race wasn't fantastic today, well, that victory by Jalinson Pantano, they'll be celebrating that in Colombia.
Yes, we finally have some Colombian success on the Tour de France, but the source of it was not Nairo Quintana, but Jalinson Pantano. Brilliant race for him, pretty good one for Chris Froome, because all the action was taking place ahead on the road and behind him in the general classification. We'll take a break. Welcome back. There is Jalinson Pantano emerging from the shadow, back into it. It's been that kind of day, in and out of the shade, but that is his moment in the limelight. Sensational win, only the second of his professional career, and by far the best as he beats Rafa Majka to take the stage win. There is the results. Pantano from Majka, Viamos and Reichenbach came in together 6 seconds down. Julian Alaphilippe, sensational ride to recover, but couldn't recover enough. 22 seconds behind the winner he was. Then it was Serge Pauwels, Pierre Rolland, Ilnur Zakarin, Danny Navarro and Tom Jelte-Schleicher. Now, I know you've all been on tenterhooks. No stripes today, he's in a checked shirt. And that out of the way, let's move on to the analysis. And, I mean, coming in, we were all thinking, oh, well, Majka's more experienced, he's doing this perfectly, and we were all wrong.
Well, no, he was doing everything right until it actually came to the killer moment with 200 metres to go. He went too early, and he went. It was actually. It looked like I've got to see where it goes. So you see here in the sprints,
just over 500 here, so the cat and mouse is still going on, and they know the other two are too far back.
Yeah, it seemed that he launched it way too early. So it's and you can see it was enough. When you do that jump like Majka did, you have to be able to take it all the way to the line, and he couldn't. And it gave Pantano enough time to get slot into his wheel and then jump again, and that's where he got it. So Majka had done everything right till then.
And I mean, you know, Majka's got to be still pretty happy with his day despite getting jumped here. There he goes, looks like he's got it, and Pantano just comes out, and it's pretty comfortable for him in the end. But as I say, a fantastic day out for Rafa Majka. He dosed his effort. He got maximum points on all the big climbs, all the ones and the super categories.
Yeah, no, he did a great ride. I mean, I'm sure he went out today with the ambition of getting the mountains jersey, getting as many points as he could. We saw him on that first climb. He was the one piling on all the pressure with Zakarin. And then the whole day he was there, getting first or second in the mountains points. And so then be fighting for the stage win, that's an amazing bonus.
Yeah, and talking of all day, I mean, it was a long day for you in that we were on from the very start, but it did give people that feel for how the breaks develop and how the first job of the day is getting into the damn thing, because Thomas de Gendt tried and couldn't.
No, exactly. Well, I think Thomas de Gendt knew that he wasn't going to be able to challenge on that first climb, because it was 6Ks, and I think he's been going in a lot of breaks, so he must be feeling fatigued now. But then it was obvious because we saw within 500 500 meters, the first attack started going, and it was pretty amazing to see all the big riders covering it, and then you had the second wave of riders from each team, the climbers, who then didn't do a move until they hit that first climb, and so it's quite interesting to see that.
Yeah, and as I say, great day for Chris Froome because all the action was taking place up the road and behind him on general classification. There he is warming down as per usual, holding up the jersey presentations, although I think they'll be held up pretty well today because Peter Sagan will be rolling in with the autobus. Let's just check the GC. No change at the very top. Froome, Mollema, Yates all with the same time gaps as this morning. Same goes for Quintana and Valverde. Romain Bardet tried but couldn't get any further up than the 4:04. He is behind. But look, Richie Porte has now leapfrogged ahead of TJ Van Garderen in their private BMC battle. 4:27 as opposed to 4:47. And we shouldn't keep going on about poor old Richie's puncture, but you know, it must be kind of haunting him.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, he's having a bit of a haunting race so far with the puncture and then hitting the motorbike, because even that day on the Mont Ventoux he was exceptionally appeared to be the strongest, and I think he'd have put even more time into everybody. But no, I think he's doing a great ride so far, and today TJ Van Garderen, that's going to be quite worrying for him and his team because he wasn't lost for an attack. It just looked like a fatigue, generally didn't have the power to stay with that group. When Bardet was off the front and when there was tempo going on, he was dropped. So that's not a good sign for the final week.
Yeah, good point. TJ dropped on a stage that wasn't a mountain finish. We will take a break and hopefully have some words from people on the other side of it. Welcome back. An easy day for the yellow jersey, as easy as a ride over 6 classified climbs in the blazing heat through the Jura Mountains can be. There's Chris Froome crossing the line. There's Romain Bardet behind him, who tried perhaps a little bit too early on the final climb and got pulled back. Quintana on Froome's wheel, he tried nothing. Adam Yates in the background didn't need to try anything. He'll be happy with third place. Likewise, Bauke Mollema in second. And no change really down from Froome through Mollema, Yates, Quintana and Valverde. Bardet is up to 6th because TJ Van Garderen has dropped down, not just behind him, but behind his teammate Richie Porte, now 20 seconds behind after losing contact with the yellow jersey group today. And the man of the day out front of it all was Jarlinson Pantano. Let's get over to the presentations with Ned.
Jarlinson Pantano is the winner of stage 15. It's an exceptional result, the biggest in his career by some distance. This has been the best racing year of his life. The man from Iron Cycling, in a year when he'll be looking for a job like every rider in that team, he'll be moving on. And what a statement, what a addition to his curriculum vitae this is. Jarlinson Pantano, winner of stage 9 of the Tour de Suisse, finishing in 4th place in that race overall. And that was just a prelude as to what was to come. And today, in the Jura Mountains, heading towards the Alps, he has made his move and made his mark, getting the better of Rafa Majka. Consistently one of a group of 3 or 4 of the strongest riders in a 30-man move that got away. In the end, that was whittled down to just him and Rafa Majka, who 3 times has won mountain stages of the Tour de France. But it wasn't to be today. Majka thought he'd done everything right, opened up his sprint, and found he'd gone too early because the Colombian just came straight past him. And in the end, the wind was comfortable. One punch of the arm in the air in delight, and then both in the air. And Colombia might not have had too much to celebrate so far with the indifferent form of Nairo Quintana, their main hope for the overall win, but they will be celebrating that like mad back home in Colombia. Pantano comes from Cali in Colombia. And this was the mountain where it looked as if Rafa Majka had dropped him. The Lacet du Grand Colombier. Absolutely spectacular scenery here. That was where Rafa Majka got away from Jarlinson Pantano, but he didn't panic. He measured his effort and he rejoined Majka. Did it on the descent, where Majka showed a little bit of weakness and Pantano flew down the mountain. Then they still had to hold off the rest of the race and execute the delivery at the finish line. In the general classification, another very comfortable day for Chris Froome as he marches on Paris. Who can possibly stop him? Well, a few had a go today. Fabio Aru definitely attacked the yellow jersey. Astana had been keen to get him up the road all day. They pretty much telegraphed their tactics on the day, and Fabio Aru duly delivered an attack. Alejandro Valverde took his opportunity to get onto the wheels of Aru, and for a while they had a little bit of a gap before Wout Poels and Mikel Nieve manoeuvred the yellow jersey back to where he feels he rightfully belongs, and he's there because at the moment he's got everybody locked down and he has this race by the scruff of the neck. Chris Froome pretty impregnable today once again. High mountains still to come. Mont Blanc over 4,000 metres. It's into the Alps we go via Switzerland. No summit finish tomorrow, but the mountains are there, make no mistake of that. All coming to a crescendo next Saturday in Morzine, before we head for Paris, where Froome wants to wear the yellow jersey on the Champs-Élysées.
Yeah, no yellow jersey presentation yet. I don't think that's anything to worry about. I think it's just that Peter Sagan isn't in for the green jersey celebration, so all the jerseys have been delayed. We'll bring you them in the highlights, of course. In the meantime, possibly the ride of the day, although it didn't get him anything in the end, was from Julian Alaphilippe. He's speaking to Daniel Friebe.
You haven't been very lucky the last few days. First that terrible crash, and today a mechanical problem at the worst moment.
Yeah, it's a life. You never know, you know. I was in the front, I was happy. I do my best, and for sure I'm really disappointed because when it's bad luck, I have problem with my chain a lot of time, and the last time I have to change my bike, so I lose all my advantage, and voila.
At that time, you really thought you were in with a chance of winning the stage when the mechanical happened. You really thought you had a good chance of winning the stage.
You never know, for sure. I do my best for trying to be in the front. I was in a break, so it was something good. But after you have also, you need also to have a chance. And today it was not my day. I have to change my bike. I lose my advantage, but I give my best until the finish line. Not for the victory, but okay. Tomorrow it's another day.
Thank you.
Poor guy, and Dave, you were massively impressed by him today.
Oh, I thought it was the ride of the day, really. I mean, we saw him; he was breaking away on that descent where he had the mechanical, but then he was almost 2 minutes behind because his team cars were behind, and they had to wait for that. And then he managed. We saw the overhead footage. We saw how angry he was, kept going through groups, and ending up at just 20 seconds, 22 seconds from Pantano, I think, was just an exceptional ride. He didn't give up, and every group he caught, he reinvigorated them and got them chasing again. And you know, it's got to be hugely disappointing for him.
All right, now I said presentations in the highlights. I think we can see the yellow jersey up on the podium now. There he is. It's going to be day number 8 tomorrow, and it's David, it's looking pretty comfortable for him, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. He's not really been challenged too much so far. I mean, Team Sky are just so strong in the mountain. Wout Poels seems to be doing it all himself, but they don't really need to use Nieve. I think Nieve rode for about 250 metres atop the Lasset de Grand Colombier today. And other than that, the other guys aren't really needed. So it goes to show just the strength and depth they have, and it's very scary for all the other teams and a little bit scary for us.
Yeah, I mean, demoralising really when you see that Sky train on the front in such numbers for so long. In the face of it, well, I mean, we don't know, and we might not know until after the Tour, whether Quintana really does have the legs. But if he wants to go, he's running out of chances to go.
Yeah, he is, but I can understand that. At the moment, we've still got some big alpine stages to come, but it is a little bit disappointing. I think we'd hoped, and we haven't seen a big assault from a team yet either. The only way they can beat Team Sky is to do an all-out assault from kilometre zero and risk losing everything, which it appears that nobody wants to try.
No, nobody wants to try. And of course, the men in 2nd and 3rd place aren't going to attack Chris Froome because they'd be perfectly happy holding on to 2nd and 3rd as things stand. Bauke Mollema and Adam Yates also having a calm day in the general classification race, and they'll be happy to still be in 2nd and 3rd. We will take some time off, sort ourselves out for the highlights, and see you